The fluorescent lights of Myers' corner store buzzed overhead as Jack Turner watched something that made his blood boil. A grown man publicly humiliating a young woman in a wheelchair, accusing her of theft with no evidence except his own prejudice. In that moment, Jack faced a choice: walk away like everyone else or stand up and risk everything. He chose to intervene. What he didn't know was that this single act of courage would unravel secrets, unite a broken family, and change his life forever. Stay with me until the end of this story and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this tale has traveled. The November wind cut through Jack Turner's worn jacket like a knife. As he pushed open the glass door of Myers' corner store, the bell above jingling with a cheerfulness that didn't match the gray sky outside. His daughter Ellie's small hand gripped his tightly, her other hand clutching the crumpled $5 bill she'd saved from her allowance, her contribution to tonight's dinner of spaghetti and meatballs. At 8 years old, she already understood that money was tight, that every dollar mattered, that Dad worked double shifts at the warehouse so she could have school supplies and the occasional ice cream cone. "Can we get the bread with the seeds on top, Dad?" Ellie asked, her voice carrying that particular hopefulness that children have when they know the answer might be no. Jack smiled down at her, brushing a strand of brown hair from her face. "The seeded bread costs an extra 50 cents, sweetheart." "I know," she said solemnly, "but it tastes like adventure." His heart squeezed. Sarah, his late wife, used to say the same thing. She'd been gone for 3 years now, cancer that moved too fast, bills that piled too high, grief that never quite faded. But Ellie had her mother's optimism, her way of finding magic in ordinary things. For that alone, Jack would buy her all the seeded bread in the world. "Adventure bread it is," he said, and her face lit up like Christmas morning. They moved through the narrow aisles, Jack's eyes automatically scanning prices, calculating in his head. The milk was on sale. That was good. The pasta sauce was not. That was less good. He grabbed a loaf of bread from the bakery section, the sesame seeds glistening under the harsh store lights, and was heading toward the dairy coolers when he heard it. A voice, sharp, aggressive, cutting through the mundane sounds of shopping carts and price scanners. "I know what you did. Don't think I'm stupid." Jack's steps slowed. Something in that tone made his instincts bristle. The same instincts that had kept him alert during late-night warehouse shifts, that had taught him to recognize when a situation was about to go sideways. "Sir, I don't know what you're talking about." A woman's voice, younger, strained but controlled. "The hell you don't. I saw you. Near the pharmacy section. You took something." Jack rounded the corner of aisle 4 and froze. Near the front counter, a tall man in his 50s, the store manager, based on his name tag that read Rick Meyer, loomed over a young woman in a wheelchair. She couldn't have been more than 26 or 27, with long dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and glasses that had slipped slightly down her nose. Her hands gripped the armrests of her chair, knuckles white. "I didn't take anything," she said, her voice remarkably steady despite the visible tension in her shoulders. "I looked at the prices, but I didn't take anything." "Well, that's what they all say." Rick's face was flushed, his jaw set in that particular expression of someone who'd already decided the truth and wasn't interested in alternatives. "Empty your bag, now." The woman's eyes darted around the store. There were perhaps 6 other customers scattered throughout, an elderly couple comparing cereal boxes, a teenager with headphones buried in his phone, a harried mother with 2 small children climbing on her shopping cart. Every single one of them was suddenly very interested in their own business, eyes averted, shoulders turned away. Jack felt Ellie's hand tighten in his. "Dad," she whispered, "that man is being mean." He was. Jack could see it clearly now. The aggressive stance, the raised voice, the public humiliation, and underneath it all, the ugly assumption that a person in a wheelchair was somehow easier to accuse, less able to defend themselves, more vulnerable to intimidation. Sarah's voice echoed in his memory, clear as a bell. "When you see wrong, don't look away. That's how darkness wins, Jack. One turned back at a time." His wife had been a social worker, had spent her career standing between vulnerable people and a world that often didn't see them, didn't care. She'd taught him that silence in the face of injustice wasn't neutrality. It was complicity. Jack set down the bread and milk on a nearby shelf. "Stay right here, sweetheart," he said softly to Ellie. "What are you going to do?" "What Mom would do." He walked toward the front of the store, his work boots heavy on the linoleum floor. Each step felt weighted with significance, like crossing a line he couldn't uncross. His heart hammered against his ribs, but his hands were steady. "Empty the bag," Rick was saying again, louder now, his finger jabbing toward the young woman's purse. "Or I'm calling the cops. Let them search you downtown. See how you like that." "Sir, I have done nothing wrong." The woman's voice cracked slightly on the last word, frustration bleeding through her composure. "This is harassment. This is my store, and I decide who gets to shop here. Now either you show me what you took, or that's enough." Jack's voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the confrontation like a blade through silk. Both Rick and the young woman turned to look at him. Up close, Jack could see the manager's face more clearly, the broken capillaries on his nose, the slight tremor in his hands that suggested too much coffee or not enough sleep, the defensive anger of someone who couldn't admit he might be wrong. "Excuse me," Rick said. "I said that's enough." Jack positioned himself between the manager and the woman in the wheelchair, a physical barrier. "You're making an accusation without evidence. You're creating a scene, and you're frightening a customer in your store." Rick's eyes narrowed. "This doesn't concern you, buddy. Keep moving." "It became my concern the moment you decided that a wheelchair made someone guilty until proven innocent." A flush crept up Rick's neck, mottling his skin. "I saw what I saw." "Yeah? What did you see?" "Specifically." "She was in the pharmacy section." "So was I," Jack interrupted. "So were 3 other people. Are you accusing all of us?" "She was acting suspicious." "Acting suspicious how? By existing? By shopping? By doing the exact same thing every other person in the store is doing?" The teenager had removed his headphones now, watching openly. The elderly couple had abandoned their cereal comparison and moved closer, sensing drama. Even the harried mother had stopped corralling her children, her attention fixed on the confrontation. Rick's jaw clenched. "Look, I don't need to explain my security procedures to you. These aren't security procedures," Jack said, his voice harder now. "This is profiling. This is discrimination. And if you actually saw her take something, you'd have called the police already instead of trying to bully her into a confession." "How dare you?" "Empty her bag," Jack said. "Go ahead. If you're so sure, prove it." Rick's eyes flickered with something, uncertainty maybe, or the dawning realization that he'd backed himself into a corner. His hand moved toward the woman's purse on her lap, and Jack's hand shot out, gripping the manager's wrist. "Actually," Jack said quietly, "don't touch her things. You want to search someone, you call the actual police and let them handle it. But you won't do that, will you? Because you don't have probable cause. You have assumptions and prejudice, and that's not enough." For a long moment, Rick and Jack locked eyes. The store had gone completely silent except for the hum of the refrigerators and the tinny music playing from the overhead speakers, some pop song about summer and freedom that felt wildly out of place. Then the young woman spoke, her voice cutting through the tension like a warm knife through butter. "You want to see what's in my bag?" She reached into her purse and upended it on the counter beside her. Out tumbled a wallet, a set of car keys with a small stuffed bear keychain, a pack of tissues, a tube of lip balm, 2 pens, a crumpled receipt from a coffee shop, and absolutely nothing else. No pills, no stolen merchandise, just the ordinary detritus of someone's daily life. "There," she said, her chin lifted in defiance. "Satisfied?" Rick's face went from red to pale in the space of a heartbeat. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again like a fish gasping for air. There must have been... I was sure..." he stammered. "You were wrong," Jack said flatly. "And now you owe this woman an apology." "I don't owe anybody." "Yes, you do." The elderly woman from the cereal aisle had moved closer, her face set in stern disapproval. "That was shameful, Rick Meyer. Absolutely shameful. I've been shopping here for 20 years and I've never seen such disgraceful behavior." Her husband nodded emphatically. "Terrible. Just terrible." Rick's mouth worked soundlessly. He looked around the store, seeing all the faces now watching him, judging him, his store, his customers, his reputation crumbling in real time. Listen, maybe I was mistaken, he finally managed, but I have a right to protect my inventory. By harassing disabled customers? The teenager asked, his phone still in his hand. Dude, I got most of that on video. My sister's gonna love this. She's studying disability rights at college. Rick's face went white. You can't... That's not... I didn't... Jack felt the young woman's hand touch his arm lightly. When he looked down, she was gazing up at him with eyes that held both gratitude and exhaustion, the particular weariness of someone who'd fought this battle too many times before. It's okay, she said softly. I just want to leave. You shouldn't have to leave, Jack said. He should apologize. I don't need his apology, I just need to get out of here. She began scooping her belongings back into her purse with quick, efficient movements. Jack noticed her hands were shaking slightly, the adrenaline finally catching up with her outward calm. At least let me help you, Jack said. She hesitated, then nodded. Together they gathered her things, Jack handing her the car keys, the wallet, watching as she stuffed everything back into her bag with movements that had the practiced ease of routine. Rick had retreated behind his counter, his face still pale, his eyes avoiding everyone. The elderly couple was speaking in low, disapproving tones. The teenager was typing rapidly on his phone. The mother with the children was ushering them quickly toward the exit, clearly not wanting to be part of whatever happened next. And Ellie... Jack turned to check on her and found his daughter exactly where he'd left her, eyes wide, bread and milk clutched in her small arms. She'd picked them up from the shelf where he'd set them down. Dad, she said, her voice carrying across the store. Can we help her? The young woman in the wheelchair turned toward Ellie's voice, and something in her expression softened. She smiled, tentatively at first, then more genuinely. Your daughter? She asked Jack. Yeah, that's Ellie. She's brave, speaking up like that. She learned it from her mother. Something flickered in the woman's eyes, understanding perhaps or recognition of shared loss. She nodded slowly. Ellie walked over, still clutching their groceries, and looked up at the woman with the directness that only children possess. That man was very rude to you. My dad says when people are rude for no reason, it means they're scared of something inside themselves. The young woman blinked rapidly, and Jack realized she was fighting back tears. Your dad is a very wise man. Sometimes, Ellie said seriously, other times he burns the pancakes. That broke the tension. The woman laughed, a real laugh, warm and genuine, and Jack felt something in his chest unclench slightly. I'm Lena, the woman said, extending her hand to Ellie first, then to Jack. Lena Brooks, Jack Turner, and you've met Ellie, my personal grocery assistant and pancake critic. Former pancake enjoyer, Ellie corrected gravely, until the burning incident of last Tuesday. Lena's smile widened. Jack noticed she had a small dimple in her left cheek, that her glasses were slightly crooked from the confrontation, that there were laugh lines around her eyes despite her relative youth. Listen, Jack said, suddenly awkward now that the adrenaline was fading. I'm sorry that happened. You shouldn't have had to deal with that. But I did, Lena said simply, and probably will again. People see the chair before they see me. She paused, then looked up at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. But you didn't. You saw what was wrong and stepped in. Most people pretend not to notice. Maybe the world would be better if more people did notice, Jack said. Maybe. She gathered her purse onto her lap, adjusting her grip on her chair's wheels. Thank you, Jack Turner, and thank you, Ellie the pancake critic. You both restored my faith a little today. She began to wheel toward the door, and Jack moved instinctively to help, pulling it open for her. The bell jingled again, that same cheerful sound, now feeling less ironic. Outside, the November wind had picked up, scattering leaves across the parking lot. Lena's car was parked in the handicapped spot nearest the door, a blue Honda with hand controls visible on the steering column. Jack had noticed those when they'd walked in, had registered them the way you register background details without really thinking about them. Can I help you with anything? He asked. Load your car or... I'm fine, Lena said, then caught herself. Actually, that came out harsher than I meant. I'm used to doing things myself. But thank you, really. She unlocked her car with the key fob, and Jack watched as she transferred from her wheelchair to the driver's seat with smooth, practiced efficiency, folding the chair, lifting it into the back seat, adjusting her position. Every movement spoke of hard-won skill, of adaptation and determination. Ellie tugged on his jacket. "Dad, we forgot to pay for our stuff." Jack looked down at the bread and milk still clutched in his daughter's arms and laughed, a slightly hysterical sound that released the last of his tension. "You're absolutely right. We forgot to actually buy our food." "I don't think Mr. Rude Man deserves our money," Ellie said seriously. "Mr. Rude Man?" Lena was laughing again, her head tilted back. "Oh, that's perfect. That's what I'm calling him from now on." "Unfortunately, Mr. Rude Man has the only corner store within walking distance," Jack said, "and Dad doesn't have a car, so—" "You walked here?" "About 6 blocks. It's fine. Good exercise." Lena looked at the darkening sky, at the wind whipping the trees, at Ellie in her thin jacket. She seemed to come to a decision. "Let me drive you home," she said. "Oh no, we couldn't. Please, it's the least I can do. And honestly," she smiled wryly, "I could use the company. I'm still too angry to go home and be alone with my thoughts about Mr. Rude Man." Jack hesitated, running through the calculus of safety and propriety and the simple human instinct not to be a burden. But Ellie was already nodding enthusiastically, and the wind was cold, and this woman, this stranger who somehow didn't feel like a stranger, was looking at him with open honesty. "Okay," he said. "Thank you. But we're paying for our groceries first." "Naturally. Can't be thieves on top of everything else." They went back inside, all 3 of them now. A united front. Rick Meyer was nowhere to be seen, having apparently retreated to his office in shame. A teenage cashier with purple hair and multiple piercings rang up their items with obvious sympathy. "That was cool what you did," she said to Jack as she bagged the bread and milk. "Rick's a jerk. Everyone knows it." "Then why does everyone shop here?" Lena asked. "Because it's the only store in 6 blocks," the cashier said with a shrug. "But I'm putting in my notice next week. I got a job at the library. Better pay, better people." "Good for you," Lena said warmly. Outside again, Jack gave Lena his address. A small apartment in a building that had seen better decades, in a neighborhood that was fighting hard not to slip into decay. She plugged it into her phone's GPS and started driving, her hands confident on the adapted controls. Ellie chattered from the back seat, asking Lena about her car, about how the hand controls worked, about whether she liked her wheelchair or wished she could walk. Questions that made Jack wince, but Lena answered them all with patience and surprising openness. "I don't really think about it in terms of liking or wishing anymore," Lena said. "This is just how my body works now. Like, do you like having 2 arms instead of 3? "I guess I never thought about it," Ellie admitted. "I just have 2 arms." "Exactly. I just have a wheelchair. It's part of how I move through the world." "But don't you miss walking?" Lena was quiet for a moment, navigating a turn. "Sometimes," she said honestly. "Mostly I miss the thoughtlessness of it. Being able to go anywhere without planning, without checking if there are stairs, or if the bathroom is accessible, or if people are going to stare. But missing something and letting it define you are different things." Jack caught her eye in the rearview mirror, and she gave him a small smile. One that said she knew these were complicated questions, that she'd thought about them 1,000 times, that she didn't mind sharing them with a curious 8-year-old. They pulled up in front of Jack's building, a 4-story walk-up with a faded brick facade and window air conditioning units jutting out at odd angles. It wasn't much, but it was home. It was safety. It was where he'd built a life for his daughter after Sarah died. "Thank you," Jack said as Ellie scrambled out with their groceries. "For the ride. For being understanding with her questions." "She's wonderful," Lena said. "You're raising a good human." "Trying to." There was a moment, brief but significant, where their eyes met and held, where something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of shared values, of similar struggles, of the kind of bone-deep weariness that comes from doing your best in a world that isn't always kind. "Maybe I'll see you around," Lena said. "Yeah, maybe." She drove away, her blue Honda disappearing into the November twilight, and Jack stood on the sidewalk watching until her taillights vanished around the corner. Dad? Ellie was tugging his hand. Is Miss Lena nice? Yeah, sweetheart. I think she might be very nice. Good. Because I liked her. She talked to me like I was a real person, not just a kid. Jack squeezed her hand as they climbed the stairs to their apartment. Third floor, no elevator, no complaints. That's because she knows what it's like when people don't see the real you. Inside their small two-bedroom apartment, Jack made spaghetti with meatballs while Ellie did homework at the kitchen table. The routine was comfortable, familiar. The sizzle of meat in the pan, the bubble of water boiling, the scratch of pencil on paper. But his mind kept drifting back to the store. To Rick Meyer's accusations and Lena Brooks's dignity. To the way everyone else had looked away and the way Ellie had spoken up. To the quiet strength in Lena's voice when she said, "People see the chair before they see me." Sarah would have liked her, he thought. Sarah, who'd spent her life seeing people that others overlooked. The homeless veteran, the struggling single mother, the teenager aging out of foster care. She'd taught him to look deeper, to push back against injustice, to never accept cruelty as inevitable. "Dad, you're stirring the sauce really hard," Ellie observed. "Is everything okay?" Jack looked down and realized he'd been attacking the marinara like it had personally offended him. He laughed and set down the spoon. "Everything's fine, sweetheart. Just thinking." "About Miss Lena?" "Among other things. I hope we see her again." "Me too, kiddo. Me too." Later that night, after dinner was eaten and dishes were washed, and Ellie was tucked into bed with her worn copy of Charlotte's Web, Jack stood at his apartment window looking out over the neighborhood. Streetlights flickered on, casting pools of orange light on the sidewalks below. Somewhere a dog barked. A car alarm chirped as someone locked their door. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary sights. An ordinary Thursday evening in an ordinary life. Except it didn't feel ordinary anymore. Something had shifted. Some small tectonic plate in the landscape of his existence had moved, and he couldn't quite identify what it meant yet. He thought about Lena's words. "You saw what was wrong and stepped in. Most people pretend not to notice." Jack had noticed. He'd stepped in. And somehow, in that moment of simple human decency, he felt like he'd honored Sarah's memory in a way that grief and longing never could. She'd always said that love wasn't just a feeling, it was a verb, an action, a choice you made every day to show up for people. Today, he'd shown up. For a stranger. For what was right. For the kind of world he wanted Ellie to grow up in. His phone buzzed on the counter, a text from his supervisor at the warehouse about tomorrow's shift assignment. Reality reasserting itself. Bills to pay, hours to work, a life that kept moving forward whether he was ready or not. But as Jack plugged in his phone and prepared for bed, he found himself hoping, just a little, just enough to notice, that maybe he would see Lena Brooks again. Maybe their paths would cross. Maybe that brief connection in a corner store parking lot was something more than a chance encounter. Maybe, just maybe, standing up for what was right could lead somewhere unexpected. He fell asleep thinking about dimples and dignity and the particular courage it took to face a world that often didn't see you, and woke up the next morning to the sound of Ellie singing in the kitchen, attempting to make breakfast, the smell of slightly burnt toast filling the apartment. "Dad," she called, "I'm making adventure toast like Mom used to." Jack smiled and swung his legs out of bed, ready to face whatever Friday brought. He had no idea that within weeks he'd see Lena Brooks again. That what started as a chance encounter would become something neither of them expected. That the simple act of refusing to look away would unravel secrets that stretched back years, would challenge everything he thought he knew about families and second chances, would transform 3 separate lives into something new and fragile and wonderful. But that Friday morning, all he knew was that he'd done the right thing, that his daughter was singing in the kitchen, that the world, despite its cruelty, still held moments of connection and grace. And sometimes that was enough. The following Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn clarity that made everything seem sharper, more vivid. Jack had just finished his warehouse shift, 6 hours of loading pallets and organizing inventory, and was walking Ellie to the farmer's market 3 blocks from their apartment. It was their ritual, this Saturday morning routine. A few dollars for fresh vegetables, maybe an apple cider donut if they could spare it, and the simple pleasure of being together in the sunshine. Ellie skipped ahead, her sneakers scuffing the sidewalk, her breath making little clouds in the cool air. She was chattering about a book report due Monday, something about frogs and their life cycles, and Jack was only half listening, his mind still fuzzy from the overnight shift. Then he saw her. Lena Brooks was at a produce stand examining tomatoes with the serious concentration of someone who took their groceries seriously. She wore a green jacket that brought out the color of her eyes, and her hair was loose around her shoulders instead of pulled back. She looked different in the morning light, softer maybe, or perhaps just more at ease than she'd been in that horrible confrontation at Myers' store. Jack's heart did something unexpected in his chest. A little skip. A flutter of recognition that felt disproportionate to their brief acquaintance. "Miss Lena!" Ellie had spotted her too and was already running forward, all 8-year-old enthusiasm and zero social restraint. "Miss Lena, it's us!" Lena looked up, and her face transformed with recognition and genuine pleasure. "Ellie! And Jack!" She smiled, setting down the tomato she'd been inspecting. "What a wonderful surprise!" "We come here every Saturday," Ellie announced. "Dad says fresh vegetables are important for growing brains. I think he just likes not cooking as much." "Guilty," Jack admitted, walking up to join them. He felt suddenly self-conscious about his appearance. He'd come straight from work, still in his warehouse uniform, probably smelling like cardboard and effort. "How have you been? No more trouble at corner stores?" "I've been avoiding that particular establishment," Lena said wryly. "Though I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that our friend Rick has been getting some negative attention. Apparently that teenager's video got some traction online." "Good," Ellie said fiercely. "He was mean to you." "He was," Lena agreed, speaking to Ellie with the same directness she'd shown before. "But you know what? I've dealt with mean people before. You learn to keep going." Jack watched the exchange, noting how Lena didn't talk down to his daughter, didn't use that sing-song voice some adults adopted around children. She treated Ellie like a person, and his daughter responded by standing a little straighter, speaking a little more thoughtfully. "Are you shopping for anything specific?" Jack asked, aware that he was looking for reasons to extend the conversation. "Just the basics. I live alone, so I don't need much." She paused, then added with a self-deprecating smile. "Though I'm a terrible cook. I can make about 5 things well, and everything else is a disaster." "Dad can only make 3 things," Ellie volunteered. "Spaghetti, grilled cheese, and regret." Lena laughed, that warm, genuine sound Jack remembered from their first meeting. "Regret's not a dish, sweetie. It is when Dad tries to make casserole." "Okay, enough roasting Dad in public," Jack said, but he was smiling. This felt easy, natural, like running into an old friend rather than someone he'd met once in a crisis. They wandered through the market together after that, falling into step without discussing it. Lena navigated her wheelchair with practiced ease through the crowds, and Jack found himself noticing things he'd never paid attention to before. Which vendors had accessible setups, where the pavement was uneven, how some people moved aside automatically while others seemed oblivious. At the apple stand, Ellie convinced them both to try samples of 3 different varieties. At the honey booth, Lena explained the difference between clover and wildflower with an expertise that surprised Jack. At the bread vendor, they all agreed that the rosemary focaccia was worth the splurge. "You know a lot about honey," Jack observed as they moved away from the booth, Ellie running ahead to look at a display of pumpkins. "I used to teach," Lena said. Her voice was casual, but Jack caught something underneath, a wistfulness maybe, or loss. "Middle school English. But I always did a unit on sustainable agriculture. The kids loved the honey lesson. We'd bring in samples, talk about pollinators, read poetry about bees." "Used to?" She was quiet for a moment, her hands still on her wheels. "After my accident, it became complicated. The school wasn't accessible. The district said they'd make accommodations, but it was clear they'd prefer I take disability leave. So I did." She glanced up at him. "That was 3 years ago. Haven't taught since." Jack heard the grief in those words, the particular pain of losing not just mobility, but identity, purpose, the thing that made you feel like yourself. "Do you miss it?" he asked. "Every day." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I miss the chaos of a classroom. The moment when a kid finally gets a metaphor, the smell of dry erase markers and teenage body spray. Weird things to miss, maybe, but not weird at all. Jack said. I miss things about my old life too, before Sarah got sick. We had plans, vacations we'd take, projects we'd finish together. You don't just lose the person, you lose the future you'd imagined with them. Lena looked at him with understanding that went beyond sympathy. Your wife? 3 years ago, cancer. I'm sorry. Me too. They stood there in the middle of the farmer's market, two people carrying grief they hadn't asked for, finding unexpected recognition in each other's eyes. Around them, life continued. Vendors calling out prices, children laughing, the scent of fresh bread and autumn apples filling the air. Miss Lena, Ellie was waving from the pumpkin display. Can you help me pick one? Dad always chooses the lopsided ones because he feels sorry for them. It's true, Jack admitted. I'm a sucker for underdog pumpkins. Well, we can't have that, Lena said, her smile returning. Come on, this requires serious pumpkin expertise. They spent 20 minutes debating the merits of various pumpkins. Ellie wanted the biggest one. Jack advocated for a charmingly lopsided, medium-sized specimen, and Lena suggested a compromise option that was both substantial and symmetrical. In the end, they bought all three. Ellie's for carving, Jack's for the front step, and Lena's because she admitted she hadn't celebrated Halloween properly in years. What do you mean properly? Ellie asked as they waited for Jack to pay. Oh, you know, decorations, costume, candy, the whole thing. I usually just turn off my lights and pretend I'm not home. Ellie looked horrified. But Halloween is the best holiday. Better than Christmas because nobody makes you write thank you cards. That's a fair point, Lena conceded. You should come to our building, Ellie continued with the fearless social planning of childhood. Dad always does the haunted hallway on our floor. Last year we had fake spiders and everything. Some kids cried. Ellie, you can't just invite people to... Actually, Lena interrupted, looking at Jack. That sounds lovely. If you don't mind. Jack found himself nodding before his brain fully engaged. Sure, yeah, it's nothing fancy, just some decorations and candy, but you're welcome, absolutely. Then it's a plan. She smiled at Ellie. I'll bring good chocolate. The full-sized bars, not the fun-sized nonsense. I love her, Ellie announced to Jack. Can we keep her? Ellie! Jack's face flushed. Sorry, she doesn't have a filter sometimes. But Lena was laughing again, unbothered. I like the no-filter approach. Refreshing. They parted ways near the market exit, Lena heading to her car while Jack and Ellie started their walk home. Jack watched her go, noting again the efficient way she moved, the straight line of her shoulders, the casual wave she threw over her shoulder. Dad, Ellie said as they walked, you're smiling weird. I am not. You are. It's like you're smiling at your thoughts. Maybe I'm just happy. Did you consider that? About what? The pumpkins? About lots of things. The pumpkins, the nice weather, my exceptionally observant daughter who notices everything. Ellie grinned and grabbed his hand, swinging it as they walked. I like Miss Lena. I noticed. Do you like her? Jack considered the question more seriously than perhaps warranted. Did he like her? He barely knew her. They'd had one crisis encounter and one pleasant morning at a farmer's market. That wasn't enough to form real opinions about someone. Except he did like her. He liked her directness, her humor, the way she'd answered Ellie's questions without condescension. He liked that she knew about honey and missed teaching and didn't apologize for taking up space in the world. Yeah, he said finally. I think I do. Good, Ellie said decisively, because I already told her about your birthday next month. She's going to make you a cake. You what? Well, somebody has to. Your birthday cakes are always from the grocery store and they taste like sadness. Jack couldn't even argue with that assessment. Halloween came on a Wednesday that year, which meant Jack had to juggle his work schedule, Ellie's costume preparations, and the haunted hallway setup all in the span of a few hours. He'd taken a half shift at the warehouse, leaving at noon to race home and transform their floor's corridor into something appropriately spooky. Mrs. Chen from 3B contributed her extensive spiderweb collection. Mr. Rodriguez in 3D provided a fog machine of questionable safety. The college students in 3A had a surprisingly sophisticated sound system that could play eerie music at just the right volume. By 5 o'clock, When early trick-or-treaters would start arriving, the third floor of their building looked like a respectable haunted house on a budget. All shadows and cobwebs and creepy music, with a few jump scares strategically placed for the older kids. Ellie was dressed as a witch, complete with a pointed hat that kept sliding over her eyes. She'd painted her face green and was cackling with disturbing enthusiasm. "Do I look scary?" she asked for the 15th time. "Terrifying," Jack assured her, adjusting his own costume. A vampire cape Sarah had made him years ago, worn but loved. Absolutely nightmare-inducing. The doorbell rang at 5:07, and Jack opened it expecting their first trick-or-treaters. Instead, he found Lena. She'd dressed as a librarian, glasses, cardigan, a little name tag that said Ms. Brooks, Information Specialist. Her wheelchair was decorated with glow-in-the-dark tape and streamers, and she held 2 enormous bags of full-sized candy bars. "I come bearing chocolate," she announced, "and I'm ready to be assigned to a station. Where do you need me?" Jack blinked, momentarily at a loss. He'd half expected her not to show. People said things, made plans they didn't keep. It was the way of casual acquaintances. But here she was, costumed and committed and carrying enough chocolate to give every kid in the building a sugar high until Christmas. "You actually came," he said, then immediately felt stupid for sounding surprised. "Of course I came. I promised." She wheeled into the apartment, looking around with interest at their small space, the worn furniture, the crayon drawings on the fridge, the basket of unfolded laundry Jack hadn't had time to deal with. "This is cozy. I like it." "It's small," Jack said automatically, seeing the space through her eyes and finding it wanting. "Small is cozy. Cozy is good." She parked near the door and started unpacking candy bars. "So what's the strategy? Do we hand these out here or are we mobile?" "Miss Lena!" Ellie came running, her witch hat flying off in her excitement. "You're here! And you brought the good chocolate." "As promised. Now show me this haunted hallway I've heard so much about." For the next 3 hours, they worked as a surprisingly effective team. Lena stationed herself at the apartment door with Ellie, distributing candy and compliments to trick-or-treaters. Jack roamed the hallway, managing the fog machine, helping the smaller kids through the scary parts, making sure nobody knocked over Mrs. Chen's favorite spider decoration. The building filled with children and laughter, pirates and princesses, superheroes and monsters, all parading through their makeshift haunted house with varying degrees of bravery. Parents lingered in the hallway, chatting and taking photos, and several of them went out of their way to compliment the setup. Around 7 o'clock, during a lull between trick-or-treaters, Jack found himself sitting on the hallway floor next to Lena's wheelchair, both of them eating candy bars they'd stolen from the distribution pile. "This is nice," Lena said, unwrapping a Snickers. "I'd forgotten how fun Halloween could be. Better than hiding in the dark, pretending you're not home?" "Significantly better." She popped a piece of chocolate in her mouth, chewing thoughtfully. "Thank you for inviting me, or rather, thank you for letting Ellie invite me." "She has a way of making executive decisions," Jack said, "but I'm glad you came. It's been nice. Having another adult around for this." It was more honest than he'd intended to be, and he felt suddenly vulnerable, like he'd revealed too much. But Lena just nodded, understanding in her eyes. "It must be hard," she said quietly, "doing everything alone, being both parents." "I'm not doing a great job at being both," Jack admitted. "I'm barely managing one. I can't braid hair for anything. I forget permission slips, and my cooking is apparently regrettable." "But you show up," Lena said firmly. "You show up every day and you try, and your daughter clearly adores you. That's not barely managing. That's doing an amazing job under impossible circumstances." Jack felt something tight in his chest loosen slightly. When was the last time someone had told him he was doing okay? When was the last time he'd let himself believe it? "You want to know something?" Lena continued, her voice softer now. "After my accident, people kept telling me I was so brave, so inspiring, just for existing, for getting dressed in the morning, for leaving the house. And I hated it because I wasn't trying to be inspiring, I was just trying to survive." She paused. "But watching you with Ellie, seeing how you've built a life for her, how you stood up for a stranger in a store because it was the right thing to do, that actually is brave. That actually is inspiring." I just did what anyone would. No, she interrupted. That's where you're wrong. Most people wouldn't. Most people look away. Before Jack could respond, a group of teenagers dressed as zombies came stumbling down the hallway, and the moment broke. But something had shifted between them, some level of understanding reached, some mutual recognition of each other's struggles and strengths. The evening wound down around 9. The trick-or-treaters dwindled to a trickle, then stopped altogether. Mrs. Chen reclaimed her spiders, Mr. Rodriguez unplugged his fog machine, and the college students in 3A turned off their sound system and retreated to their apartment with promises to help clean up tomorrow. Ellie had fallen asleep on the couch, still in her witch costume, her face paint smudged and her candy bag clutched to her chest. Jack carried her to bed, carefully removing her hat and shoes, pulling the blanket up to her chin. She murmured something about chocolate and scary hallways and drifted deeper into sleep. When he returned to the living room, Lena was still there, helping gather stray candy wrappers and straighten the furniture they'd moved aside. You don't have to do that, Jack said. I know, but I want to help. She deposited a handful of wrappers in the trash and looked up at him. Tonight was really special, Jack. Thank you. Thank you for coming, for the chocolate, for being so good with Ellie. Ellie makes it easy. She hesitated, then added, You know, she was telling me earlier that she's struggling with reading, that her class is ahead of her and she's feeling behind. Jack felt his stomach sink. He knew Ellie was having trouble. The teacher had sent home notes, and he'd been trying to help with homework, but between his work schedule and his own exhaustion, it wasn't enough. I don't know what to do, he admitted. I can't afford a tutor, and I'm not home enough to work with her consistently, and she's starting to think she's stupid, which kills me because she's so smart. She just needs... Let me help, Lena said. Jack stopped mid-sentence. What? Let me tutor her. Reading was my specialty when I taught. I'm good at it, and I miss it, and honestly, it would be doing me a favor. I need something purposeful to do. Lena, I couldn't ask you to... You're not asking, I'm offering. She met his eyes steadily. No charge. Consider it a thank you for standing up for me in that store, for treating me like a person instead of a problem, for including me tonight. Jack felt emotion rise in his throat, unexpected and overwhelming. That's too much. You don't owe me anything. I don't do this because I owe you, Lena said gently. I do it because I want to, because Ellie's a great kid who deserves help, because you're a good father trying his best, and because... She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully, because maybe we could all use more people in our lives who give a damn. It was the most vulnerable thing she'd said, the closest she'd come to admitting that maybe she was lonely too, that maybe she needed this connection as much as they did. Okay, Jack said finally, if you're sure. I'm sure. When would you want to start? How about next Saturday, after the farmer's market? She could come to my place, or I could come here, whatever works. Here might be easier. My schedule is unpredictable. Here it is, then. She smiled, and Jack noticed again the dimple in her left cheek, the way her eyes crinkled at the corners. I'll bring books and patience. She'll bring enthusiasm and terrible knock-knock jokes. I can handle that. They stood there for a moment, the apartment quiet around them, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic outside. Jack became aware of how close they were standing, how easy it would be to reach out, to touch her hand or her shoulder, or... He stepped back, suddenly nervous. This was moving into territory he hadn't explored in years, feelings he'd carefully packed away after Sarah died. It was too soon, too complicated, too risky. I should probably go, Lena said, seeming to sense his retreat. It's getting late. Let me walk you to your car. I'm fine, really. Humor me. These streets aren't great after dark. She relented, and they made their way down the 3 flights of stairs, Jack carrying her wheelchair while she navigated the steps using the handrail and her upper body strength. He'd offered to help, but she'd waved him off, and he'd learned enough to respect that boundary. Her car was parked under a streetlight, and Jack loaded her wheelchair into the back seat while she settled into the driver's seat. The night air was cold now, their breath-making clouds in the darkness. Drive safe, Jack said. Always do. She started the engine, then looked up at him through the open window. Jack? Tonight reminded me of something I'd forgotten. What's that? that there are still good people in the world, that community matters, that maybe I don't have to do everything alone. Her voice was soft but steady. So thank you for tonight, for 2 weeks ago at the store, for being kind. You're pretty kind yourself, Jack managed, his throat tight. Then maybe we're well matched, she said lightly, but her eyes held his for a beat longer than necessary before she shifted into drive. See you Saturday. Saturday, Jack confirmed. He watched her drive away, taillights disappearing down the street, taking with them the warmth of the evening and leaving him standing in the cold November night, wondering what exactly was happening, what this growing connection meant, and whether he was ready for any of it. Upstairs, the apartment felt emptier than it had an hour ago. Jack cleaned up the remaining Halloween debris, threw away the last candy wrappers, turned off the lights. In her room, Ellie slept peacefully, her witch hat on the floor beside her bed. Jack stood in the doorway watching her, the way he often did, marveling at this small person he'd helped create, this perfect blend of himself and Sarah, this reason he kept going even when exhaustion felt like a physical weight. Your mom would have liked her, he whispered to his sleeping daughter. I think she'd tell me it's okay to like her too. Saturday arrived wrapped in rain and gray skies. Jack almost texted Lena to reschedule. The weather felt like a bad omen, a sign that maybe he should slow down this growing friendship before it became something more complicated. But Ellie was so excited, so eager to show off her reading skills and spend time with Miss Lena, that he couldn't bring himself to cancel. Lena arrived promptly at 2, somehow managing to look put together despite navigating her wheelchair through puddles. She brought a backpack full of books, a folder of worksheets, and an energy that immediately filled their small apartment with purpose. All right, Miss Ellie, she said, settling at their kitchen table. Show me what you're working on in school. What followed was remarkable. Jack had intended to give them space to retreat to the living room with his laptop and tackle some bills, but he found himself lingering in the doorway, watching as Lena worked with his daughter. She didn't talk down to Ellie or express frustration when she stumbled over words. Instead, she asked questions, broke down complex concepts into manageable pieces, and celebrated every small success with genuine enthusiasm. When Ellie struggled with a particularly difficult passage, Lena didn't push. She pivoted to a different book, a different approach, finding the path that worked for his daughter's specific learning style. You're doing great, Lena said after about 40 minutes. Do you know how I can tell? How? Ellie asked, leaning forward eagerly. Because you're trying hard things. Anyone can read easy books, but you're tackling words that challenge you, and that's what makes your brain grow. That's what makes you a reader. I want to be a reader, Ellie said seriously. Like Dad. He reads books to me every night. He does? Lena glanced at Jack, who shrugged sheepishly from the doorway. It's our thing, he said. Has been since she was a baby. That's wonderful. Lena smiled at him, warm, approving, and Jack felt something flutter in his chest again. Reading together is one of the best gifts a parent can give. They worked for another hour, taking a break for snacks and conversation before diving back into phonics and comprehension. By the time Lena started packing up her materials, Ellie was exhausted but glowing with pride. Can we do this every week? She asked. Please? Absolutely, Lena said. As long as your dad's okay with it. More than okay, Jack said. You're amazing with her. Seriously, I watched you work and it's like, you see exactly what she needs. That's because I spent years learning how to see kids, Lena said, zipping her backpack. Every child learns differently. The trick is figuring out their specific path. After Ellie went to her room to practice the new reading technique Lena had taught her, Jack walked Lena to the door. The rain had stopped, leaving everything washed clean and smelling of wet pavement. Thank you, he said. Really, you have no idea what this means. I think I do, actually. She paused, her hand on the door frame. Jack, can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you help me that day? In the store? You didn't know me, you had no obligation, but you stepped in anyway. Jack considered the question, trying to find words for something he'd always felt but never quite articulated. My wife used to say that we're all just walking each other home, he said finally. That life is hard enough without people making it harder, And when you see someone being treated unfairly, when you have the ability to do something about it, he trailed off, then met her eyes. I guess I'd want someone to do the same for me, for Ellie. It wasn't complicated, but it was brave. No, brave would be doing something dangerous. I just did something decent. Decent is rarer than you think, Lena said softly. They stood there in the doorway, the afternoon light slanting through the windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Jack became aware of her perfume, something subtle, maybe lavender, and the way her eyes held his without wavering. Lena, he started, then stopped, unsure what he wanted to say. Yeah? I'm glad we met. Is that weird to say? We've only known each other a few weeks, but I'm glad. She smiled, that genuine, warm smile that made her whole face change. It's not weird. I'm glad too. And that became their pattern. Every Saturday after the farmer's market, Lena came to their apartment and worked with Ellie on reading. But it became more than just tutoring sessions. They'd have dinner together, Jack's limited repertoire supplemented by Lena's surprisingly good salads and the occasional takeout splurge. They'd talk while Ellie practiced her reading, sharing stories about their lives, their losses, their hopes. Jack learned that Lena had been engaged before her accident, that her fiancé had left 6 months into her recovery, unable to handle the new version of her. He learned that she'd grown up wealthy but had chosen teaching over joining her family's business empire, much to her father's disappointment. He learned that she missed horseback riding more than almost anything, that she'd been an accomplished equestrian before the accident that changed everything. Lena learned that Jack had dropped out of college when Sarah got pregnant with Ellie, that he'd planned to go back but life kept intervening. She learned about his warehouse job, about how he took extra shifts whenever possible, but worried constantly about missing time with his daughter. She learned that he'd been a musician once, played guitar in a band that almost made it, almost got signed, almost became something before reality insisted on responsibility. Do you still play? She asked one evening in early December, when the first snow had started to fall outside their windows. Not really. Haven't picked up my guitar in probably 2 years. That's a shame. Music is important. So's paying rent. Both can be true. She was quiet for a moment, then said, You know what I miss most about teaching? It's not the lesson plans or the grading or even the kids, though I miss them too. It's the feeling of being useful, of having purpose beyond just existing. Jack understood that completely. Is that why you're doing this? Tutoring Ellie? Partly. She looked at him directly. But mostly I'm doing it because I like you both. Because coming here has become the best part of my week. Because for the first time since my accident, I feel like I'm part of something again. Like I belong somewhere. The confession hung in the air between them, vulnerable and honest. Ellie was in her room, practicing reading aloud to her stuffed animals. The apartment was warm despite the winter cold outside. Snow fell silently against the windows. You do belong here, Jack said quietly. You've become important to us. Important how? Lena asked, and there was something in her voice, a hopefulness maybe, or a question she was afraid to ask directly. Jack took a breath, about to say something true and terrifying, when Ellie's door flew open. Dad! Miss Lena! I read the whole chapter without help! The whole chapter! The moment shattered, but maybe that was for the best. Maybe Jack wasn't ready to name what was growing between them, wasn't prepared to risk the comfortable friendship they'd built by admitting he was starting to feel something more. But as he watched Lena celebrate with Ellie, as he saw the joy on both their faces, he knew with absolute certainty that this woman had become essential to their lives. Not just useful, not just helpful, but genuinely, deeply important. And that realization was both wonderful and terrifying in equal measure. Christmas came with its usual chaos of lights and last-minute shopping, and Ellie's growing list of modest wishes that still felt impossible on Jack's budget. But this year felt different somehow, warmer despite the bitter cold that had settled over the city. Lena had become woven into the fabric of their lives so seamlessly that Jack couldn't remember what Saturdays had felt like before her. They'd established traditions without meaning to. The farmer's market had moved indoors for winter, but they still went every week, the three of them navigating the crowded aisles and debating the merits of different root vegetables. Ellie's reading had improved dramatically. She was nearly caught up with her class now, devouring books with the hunger of someone who'd discovered a new superpower. And somewhere along the way, Lena had stopped being Miss Lena the tutor and had simply become Lena, part of their small family unit. It was the week before Christmas when everything changed. Jack had just gotten home from an overnight shift, exhausted down to his bones, when his phone rang. Lena's name flashed on the screen, and he answered with a smile despite his tiredness. "Hey, I was just about to text you about Saturday." "Jack." Her voice stopped him cold. It was wrong, tight and scared, and nothing like her usual warmth. "Jack, can you come over, please?" His exhaustion evaporated instantly. "What's wrong? Are you hurt?" "No, I'm not hurt. I can't explain on the phone. Can you come? I know it's asking a lot, but I don't know who else to call." "Give me your address. I'll be there in 20 minutes." Ellie was at school, which meant he didn't have to explain or make arrangements. He grabbed his keys and was out the door before he'd fully processed what he was doing, running on pure instinct and the undeniable knowledge that Lena needed him. Her apartment was in a nicer part of town than he'd expected, a modern building with an elevator and a doorman who gave Jack's rumpled warehouse uniform a skeptical look before calling up to confirm his arrival. The whole place screamed money in a way that made Jack suddenly conscious of his worn jacket and scuffed boots. Lena's apartment was on the 4th floor, and she opened the door before he could knock. She looked terrible, pale and shaking, her eyes red like she'd been crying. Behind her, he could see an apartment that was beautiful and carefully accessible, everything at the right height, everything designed for independence. But something was very wrong. "Thank you for coming," she said, wheeling backward to let him in. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have called, but I didn't know what else to do." "Lena, what happened?" Jack knelt beside her chair so they were eye level. "Talk to me." She took a shaky breath. "My father found me." The words hung in the air, weighted with significance Jack didn't fully understand yet. He waited, giving her space to continue. "I need to tell you something," she said finally. "Something I should have told you before, but I didn't want it to change how you saw me." "Okay," Jack said carefully. "My last name is Brooks. Lena Brooks." She watched his face, waiting for recognition that didn't come. "Edward Brooks is my father." The name meant nothing to Jack for a moment, and then, slowly, like puzzle pieces clicking into place, it did. Edward Brooks, the billionaire tech mogul, the man whose face appeared on magazine covers and business news programs, one of the wealthiest people in the country. "Oh," Jack said inadequately. "Yeah." Lena's laugh was bitter. "Oh. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because people treat me differently when they know. They see the money instead of me. They make assumptions, or they want something." She met his eyes, vulnerable and afraid. "You were the first person in years who looked at me like I was just Lena. Not Edward Brooks's daughter, not the poor rich girl in a wheelchair, just me." Jack sat back on his heels, processing this information. Lena was wealthy. Not comfortable, not well off, but wealthy in a way he couldn't fully comprehend, and she'd hidden it from him for months. "I'm not angry," he said, because she looked like she was bracing for his anger. "I'm just trying to understand. If your father is Edward Brooks, why are you living here? Why were you at that corner store in our neighborhood? Why am I not in some mansion being waited on hand and foot?" She finished his unspoken question. "Because I left. After my accident, my father became controlling. He hired nurses, therapists, handlers. He had my apartment modified, my schedule managed, my entire life orchestrated. Every doctor's appointment, every meal, every moment was supervised. He meant well. He was terrified of losing me, but he was suffocating me." She paused, gathering herself. "I wasn't a person anymore. I was a problem to be managed, a broken thing to be fixed, or at least carefully contained. So 6 months ago, I left. I found this place, used money from a trust my mother left me, and I've been living independently ever since." "And he's been looking for you?" "Not exactly. I sent him an email when I left, told him I needed space. He respected it, mostly, but then," she gestured helplessly. "Then he saw something. A video online from Halloween. Some parent posted pictures from your haunted hallway on social media, and I'm in the background. My father has people who monitor for any mention of me, any appearance. He found it. Jack remembered the parents taking photos that night, everyone's phones out, documenting their children's costumes and the festivities. He'd been so focused on making the evening special that he hadn't thought about the implications. So he knows where you are, Jack said. Worse, he's here, in the city. He called an hour ago and said he's coming over tonight. He wants to talk, which in Edward Brooks' language means he wants to convince me to come home, to let him take care of me, to stop this independence experiment, as he called it. Her voice cracked. And I'm terrified that I'm not strong enough to say no. Jack reached out and took her hand. It was the first time he'd initiated physical contact beyond casual touches, and her fingers closed around his immediately, gripping tight. Why would you say yes if you don't want to? He asked. Because part of me does want to. The admission seemed to cost her. Because living independently is hard. Because there are days when managing everything alone feels impossible. Because he's my father and he loves me, and I know his controlling behavior comes from fear of losing me like he lost my mother. She looked at their joined hands. And because I'm tired, Jack. I'm so tired of proving myself, of fighting for basic respect, of navigating a world that wasn't built for me. But you've been doing it, Jack said firmly. You've been doing it beautifully. You have this place, you're teaching Ellie, you're building a life on your own terms. Am I? Or am I just being stubborn and prideful? Maybe he's right. Maybe I should accept help. Maybe independence is overrated. Independence isn't overrated, Jack said. But you're right that none of us should have to do everything alone. That's different from giving up your autonomy entirely. Lena looked at him, tears pooling in her eyes. I don't want to go back to being managed, to being treated like I'm fragile and incapable, but I also don't want to lose my relationship with my father. He's the only family I have left. Then tell him that. Set boundaries. Let him be your father without letting him be your warden. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, but it's possible. Jack squeezed her hand. Do you want me to be here? When he comes? Relief flooded her face. Would you? I know that's asking a lot. You called me because you needed someone. I'm here. That's what... He paused, searching for the right word. What were they to each other? Friends felt insufficient, but anything more felt presumptuous. That's what people do for each other. She nodded, wiping her eyes with her free hand. He'll be here at 6. I should warn you, he can be, intense, intimidating. He's used to being the smartest person in any room, used to getting what he wants. I've handled worse than intimidating rich people, Jack said, with a confidence he didn't entirely feel. I work in a warehouse. I've dealt with some truly terrifying forklift operators. That got a small laugh from her. Watery, but real. Thank you for coming. For not treating me differently now that you know. Why would I treat you differently? You're still the same person who helped a stranger at a farmer's market, who makes Ellie laugh, who knows way too much about honey. He smiled. The money doesn't change any of that. You'd be surprised how many people it does change things for. Then they're idiots. She laughed again, stronger this time, and some of the tension eased from her shoulders. They spent the next few hours talking, Lena filling in the details of her life that she'd carefully edited out before. Her childhood of privilege and private schools, her mother's death from a sudden aneurysm when Lena was 16, her father's grief transforming into overprotective control, her decision to become a teacher despite having access to the family fortune, wanting to build something of her own, and the accident. She finally told him the full story of what happened 3 years ago at the Therapeutic Riding Center where she volunteered. A young boy, maybe 7 years old, had wandered into the arena during a session. A horse had spooked. Lena had seen the danger before anyone else, had pushed the child out of the way. The horse's kick had caught her instead, shattering her spine, stealing her ability to walk, changing everything. The boy was fine, she said, not even a scratch. His parents sent flowers to the hospital, then moved away. I don't even know his name. You saved his life, Jack said. I ruined mine. No. Jack's voice was firm. You didn't ruin anything. Something terrible happened to you, but you survived. You adapted. You built a new life. That's not ruin. That's courage. My father doesn't see it that way. He sees the accident as something that happened to both of us. He lost his perfect daughter, the one who could ride horses and dance at charity galas and eventually take over the family business. Now he has this, she gestured at herself, at the wheelchair. This version he doesn't know how to fix. You're not broken, Jack said, and you don't need fixing. Try telling him that. At exactly 6 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Lena's whole body tensed, and Jack stood up, positioning himself where he could see the door, but not look like he was trying to intimidate anyone. Though honestly, what could he possibly do to intimidate a billionaire? Lena wheeled to the door and opened it, and Edward Brooks stepped into the apartment. He was exactly what Jack expected, and somehow more. Tall, silver-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Jack made in 3 months. His face was angular and handsome in the way of men who took care of themselves, who had personal trainers and nutritionists and dermatologists. But his eyes were tired and worried and exactly like Lena's. "Lena," he said, and his voice cracked slightly on her name. "Thank God. When I saw that video, when I realized where you were, I had to..." He stopped, noticing Jack for the first time. "Who's this?" "This is Jack Turner," Lena said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "He's a friend." Edward's gaze swept over Jack, cataloging and dismissing him in seconds. The warehouse uniform, the cheap sneakers, the obvious signs of someone from a different world entirely. "A friend. I see. Dad, please don't do that." "Do what?" "That thing where you assess people and find them lacking. Jack is important to me. You will treat him with respect." Something flickered in Edward's face. Surprise, maybe, at his daughter's tone. He extended his hand to Jack, and after a moment's hesitation, Jack shook it. Edward's grip was firm but not crushing. A businessman's handshake calibrated for maximum impression. "Mr. Turner," Edward said, "thank you for whatever you're doing here." "I'm here because Lena asked me to be," Jack said simply. "How convenient." Edward turned back to his daughter. "Lena, we need to talk. Privately. Anything you want to say to me, you can say in front of Jack." Edward's jaw tightened. "This is family business. Jack is..." Lena paused, and Jack saw her make a decision in real time. "Jack is important to me. He stays." For a long moment, father and daughter stared at each other, wills clashing silently. Finally, Edward sighed and moved further into the apartment, his eyes taking in the space with the same assessing quality he'd used on Jack. "This is where you've been living? This place?" "This apartment, yes. It's accessible, affordable, and mine." "Affordable?" Edward's laugh was bitter. "Lena, you're using money from your mother's trust to live in a building where the elevator breaks twice a month. You could have anything, be anywhere, and you choose this?" "Yes," Lena said firmly. "I choose this. I choose independence. I choose making my own decisions." "Independence?" Edward spat the word like it was poison. "Is that what you call it? Living alone, struggling with basic tasks, putting yourself in situations like..." He gestured vaguely. "Like whatever happened in that corner store I heard about. Did you know about that, this incident where she was accused of theft?" "I was there," Jack said quietly. "I saw what happened." Edward turned to him, really looking at him for the first time. "You were there?" "The store manager was harassing Lena, making baseless accusations because of her wheelchair. I intervened." "And you are..." "What exactly?" "Her protector? Her friend? Her..." Edward's eyes narrowed. "Something more?" "Dad!" Lena's face flushed. "That's none of your business." "It absolutely is my business when strange men are inserting themselves into your life. How do you know he's not after your money? How do you know he's not taking advantage of..." "Stop!" Lena's voice cut through the apartment like a whip. "Stop right there. Jack doesn't know anything about money. He helped me because it was the right thing to do, not because he wants something from me." "Everyone wants something," Edward said wearily. "That's what you don't understand, Lena. The world isn't kind to people like you. People see vulnerability and they exploit it. People like me? Lena's voice went dangerously quiet. You mean disabled people? Is that what you're trying not to say? I mean people who are vulnerable, weak, unable to take care of themselves. She was shaking now, but with anger rather than fear. I am so tired of you treating my wheelchair like it's a character flaw, like I'm somehow less capable, less intelligent, less worthy of making my own choices. That's not what It's exactly what you mean. Lena's voice rose. You've been treating me like broken glass since the accident, hiring people to manage me, scheduling my life, making decisions for me. I'm not a child, Dad. I'm not incompetent. I'm just disabled, and there's a difference. Edward's face was pale. I was trying to protect you. After your mother died, you're all I have left. The thought of losing you, of something happening because I wasn't there to prevent it. But you can't prevent everything, and you're not supposed to. I'm 28 years old. I'm supposed to be living my life, making mistakes, learning, growing, not sitting in some mansion being watched and managed and slowly suffocating. Is that what I was doing? Suffocating you? Yes, Lena said, and tears were streaming down her face now. Yes, Dad, you were. With love, with good intentions, but yes. Jack stood frozen, witnessing this raw family drama unfold, feeling like an intruder but unable to leave because Lena had asked him to stay. He watched Edward's face cycle through emotions, anger, denial, hurt, and finally something that looked like dawning comprehension. I didn't know, Edward said finally, his voice rough. I thought I was helping. After the accident, you were so broken, and I just wanted to fix things for you. But I'm not a thing to be fixed, Lena said. I'm your daughter, and I needed you to see me, not just my wheelchair, to trust that I could adapt and build a new life. To let me try and fail, and try again without swooping in to rescue me from every challenge. Edward sat down heavily on Lena's couch, suddenly looking every one of his 60 years. Your mother would have known what to do. She always knew how to balance protection and freedom. He rubbed his face. I was so scared, Lena, when I got the call about your accident, when they said you might not survive, when they said you'd never walk again. I thought I'd lose you. And then when you did survive, I became terrified of all the ways the world could hurt you again. But you were hurting me too, Lena said softly, wheeling closer to her father, by not trusting me, by making me feel helpless. I know. Edward looked up at her, and Jack saw tears in the older man's eyes. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. Lena reached out and took her father's hand. I don't want to lose you, Dad, but I can't go back to the way things were. I need to live my own life, make my own choices, even if sometimes those choices lead to mistakes. Like living in a building with a broken elevator? Like living in a building with a broken elevator, Lena confirmed, but she was smiling slightly through her tears. Edward was quiet for a long moment, still holding his daughter's hand. Then he looked at Jack, who'd been trying to blend into the wallpaper. You, he said, Jack Turner. Tell me about yourself. Dad, you don't need to humor me, please. Edward's voice was gentler now. If you're important to my daughter, I'd like to know who you are. Jack moved forward carefully, like approaching a skittish animal. I'm nobody special. I work in a warehouse. I have an 8-year-old daughter named Ellie. I'm a widower. I met Lena when she was being mistreated at a corner store, and I couldn't stand by and watch that happen. Just a good Samaritan, then. Just someone who was taught to do the right thing when possible. And now? Jack glanced at Lena, who was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Now Lena's tutoring my daughter in reading. She's incredible at it. She was a teacher before the accident. Ellie's gone from struggling to thriving in just a few months. For free, I assume? There was something sharp in Edward's tone. I offered to pay, Jack said evenly. She refused. How convenient for you. Dad! Lena's voice was sharp, but Jack held up a hand. No, it's okay. Mr. Brooks, I understand your suspicion. If I had a daughter, I'd be protective too. But I'm not after Lena's money because until an hour ago, I had no idea she had money. I thought she was just a smart, kind woman who was good with kids and happened to become friends with my family. Friends, Edward repeated. Is that all? The question hung in the air, weighted with implications. Jack felt Lena's eyes on him, felt the moment demanding honesty he wasn't sure he was ready to give. I care about your daughter, Jack said carefully. She's become important to me and to Ellie. I respect her. I admire her. And yes, I suppose I've developed feelings that go beyond friendship, but I haven't acted on them because I didn't want to complicate things, didn't want to risk the relationship we've built. Lena made a small sound, surprise or something else, but Jack kept his focus on Edward. You want to know if I'm good enough for her? Jack continued. Honestly? Probably not. I'm broke. I work 60 hours a week just to keep my head above water, and my idea of a fancy dinner is pasta that doesn't come from a box. But I see your daughter, not her wheelchair, not her money, not her limitations. I see Lena, smart, funny, strong, kind. That's who I care about. The silence that followed was deafening. Edward studied Jack with those sharp eyes, and Jack met his gaze steadily, refusing to be intimidated despite the vast gulf of wealth and power between them. Finally, Edward spoke. You remind me of someone. Who? Me. 35 years ago, when I met Lena's mother. I was nobody. A startup founder with more ambition than money, trying to convince Caroline's father that I was worthy of his daughter. He smiled sadly. He hated me. Thought I was after her trust fund. Took me 2 years to prove him wrong. Dad, I didn't know that, Lena said softly. There's a lot you don't know about those early days. Your mother and I eloped because her father refused to give his blessing. He came around eventually, but those first few years, Edward shook his head. I just wanted to protect her from everything, including the struggles we faced building the company. She set me straight pretty quickly, told me she didn't marry me to be protected. She married me to be partners. He looked at Lena. I've been doing to you what I used to do to her, trying to protect instead of trust, trying to fix instead of support. Your mother would be furious with me. She'd be proud of you for realizing it, Lena said. Maybe. Edward stood up, straightening his suit jacket. I can't pretend I'm thrilled about your living situation. This apartment, this neighborhood, it's not what I would choose for you. But it's what I choose for myself. Yes, I can see that now. He moved toward her, and Lena wheeled forward to meet him. Edward bent down and embraced his daughter, and Jack looked away, giving them privacy for this moment of reconciliation. When Edward pulled back, his eyes were red. Can we try again? With boundaries this time? I promise not to manage your life, and you promise to let me be part of it? I'd like that, Lena said, wiping her own tears. But Dad, you have to really mean it. No nurses showing up unannounced, no trying to control my schedule, no making decisions for me. I mean it. I'll need you to be patient with me. This is a learning curve, but I mean it. He paused. Although I reserve the right to fix that elevator in your building, not because you can't handle it, but because everyone deserves a working elevator. Lena laughed, wet and a little hysterical. Okay, the elevator is acceptable. Edward turned to Jack. And you, Jack Turner. I don't know what's happening between you and my daughter, and frankly, it's none of my business unless she makes it my business. But if you hurt her, if you take advantage of her kindness or her trust, you'll discover that being protective and being a billionaire is a dangerous combination. Dad! Lena was mortified, but Jack just nodded. Fair enough. Though, for what it's worth, hurting her would hurt me too. That's how caring about people works. Something shifted in Edward's expression. Not quite approval, but maybe the beginning of respect. I'm going to leave now. Give you two some space to talk. Lena, I'll call you tomorrow. Maybe we could have lunch? I'd like that. No entourage, no handlers, just us. Perfect. Edward moved toward the door, then paused. Jack, thank you for being here tonight. I don't think she would have stood up to me like that without your support. She's stronger than you think, Jack said. She would have done it anyway. Maybe, but it's easier to be brave when you're not alone. After Edward left, the apartment felt suddenly empty and too quiet. Lena sat motionless in her chair, staring at the closed door like she couldn't quite believe what had just happened. Lena? Jack said softly. She turned to look at him, and he saw 100 emotions cycling across her face. relief, exhaustion, hope, fear, and something else he couldn't quite name. "You told my father you have feelings for me," she said. Jack's heart started pounding. "I did. Was that... Should I not have said that?" "I don't know. I just..." She wheeled closer to him. "Is it true? Or were you just trying to prove a point to him?" "It's true." The words felt like jumping off a cliff, terrifying and exhilarating at once. I've been trying not to feel it because it seemed complicated and risky and potentially disaster-prone. But yeah, it's true. "Why didn't you say anything before?" "Because I didn't want to pressure you. Because you were grieving your broken engagement, and I was grieving my wife. And it seemed like maybe we both needed friendship more than romance. Because I was scared." "Of what?" "Of ruining what we have. Of not being enough. Of all the ways this could go wrong." He met her eyes. "You're Lena Brooks, daughter of a billionaire. I'm Jack Turner, warehouse worker barely making rent. That's a pretty significant gap." "The money doesn't matter," Lena said fiercely. "That's what I've been trying to tell everyone. The money isn't me." "I know, but it's still real. Your father isn't wrong that we're from different worlds." "So what?" Lena wheeled right up to him, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her eyes. "My father and mother came from different worlds too. It didn't make their love any less real." "Lena, do you want to know why I didn't tell you about the money?" she interrupted. "It wasn't just because I wanted you to see me. It's because when I'm with you and Ellie, I feel like the person I was before the accident, before the wealth and the wheelchair and all the complicated identity stuff. I feel like just Lena, someone who can laugh and teach and eat adventure bread and not be defined by either my limitations or my trust fund." Jack reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face gently. "You are just Lena. That's all you've ever been to me. Then why are you scared of this? Of us?" "Because I have a daughter to think about. Because I'm falling for you. And if this doesn't work out, it won't just break my heart. It'll break Ellie's too. She adores you." "And I adore her," Lena said. Her hand came up to cover his where it rested against her cheek. "I adore both of you. These last few months have been the happiest I've been since before my accident. Coming to your apartment, teaching Ellie, spending time with you, it's become the center of my week. The thing I look forward to most." They were so close now, close enough that Jack could count her eyelashes, could see the slight tremor in her lips, could feel the warmth of her breath. "What are we doing?" he whispered. "I think we're finally being honest," she whispered back. Jack leaned down slowly, giving her every opportunity to change her mind, to pull away, to say this was a mistake. But she didn't. Instead, she tilted her face up to meet him, and when their lips finally touched, it felt like something inevitable clicking into place. The kiss was soft and tentative at first, a question being asked and answered. Then Lena's hand slid to the back of his neck, pulling him closer, and Jack deepened the kiss, pouring into it all the feelings he'd been carefully restraining for months. The admiration, the desire, the growing certainty that this woman had become essential to his life. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Jack rested his forehead against hers. "We're really doing this?" he asked. "I think we already are," she said, and there was joy in her voice, wonder and hope, and the particular courage of someone choosing to risk their heart again. "Your father is going to have me investigated. Probably. He'll find that your credit score is terrible, your work history is impeccable, and you once got a speeding ticket in 2019. How did you... I may have already done some light Googling," she admitted sheepishly. "Also, your late wife was beautiful, and I can see so much of her in Ellie." Jack pulled back slightly to look at her. "Does that bother you, that I was married before? That I still love Sarah's memory?" "No," Lena said simply. "Love doesn't run out. Having loved her doesn't mean you can't love again. And honestly, the fact that you were a devoted husband and are an amazing father is part of why I trust you. You know how to show up for people. So do you. You show up for Ellie every week. You showed up for me tonight, even when you were scared." "Well, we show up for each other," Lena corrected. "That's what this is. Two people who've been through hard things, choosing to be brave enough to try again." Jack kissed her again, longer this time, deeper, with the certainty of someone who'd made a decision and was committed to seeing it through. When his phone buzzed with a text from Ellie's school, he groaned against Lena's lips. "I have to pick up Ellie," he said reluctantly. "I know. I don't want to leave." "I don't want you to leave either, but Ellie needs you." Jack stood up, already mourning the loss of closeness. "Can I see you tomorrow? We could talk more about what this means, figure out how to move forward." "Come for dinner," Lena said. "All of you. I'll cook something that's not a disaster. Probably. Maybe we should have backup pizza." Definitely backup pizza. Jack moved toward the door, then turned back. "Lena, thank you for calling me tonight, for trusting me to be here. Thank you for coming, for standing beside me, for seeing me." "Always," Jack said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. As he drove to Ellie's school, his mind was racing. Everything had changed in the span of a few hours. Lena was Lena Brooks, daughter of a billionaire. They'd kissed. They'd admitted feelings. Her father knew about him and hadn't immediately had him thrown out of the building. And somehow, impossibly, it all felt right. His phone rang as he pulled into the school parking lot. Lena's name flashed on the screen. "Miss me already?" he answered, smiling. "Desperately, but I actually called to say something I forgot to say before." "What's that?" Her voice was soft but steady when she spoke. "I'm falling for you too, Jack Turner. Have been for a while now. Just thought you should know." Jack sat in his car, hand on the steering wheel, heart full to bursting. "Yeah," he said. "I should definitely know that." When he hung up and went to collect Ellie, he was smiling so broadly that his daughter immediately noticed. "Dad, why do you look like that?" "Like what, sweetheart?" "Like you ate all the good chocolate and don't feel bad about it." Jack laughed and picked her up, spinning her around despite her protests that she was too old for such things. "I'll tell you at dinner. We're going to Lena's place tomorrow night." "Yes!" Ellie pumped her fist. "Is Miss Lena your girlfriend now?" Jack nearly stumbled. "What makes you say that?" "Because you get all smiley and weird when you talk about her, and she gets smiley and weird when she talks about you." "I'm 8, Dad, not stupid." "No," Jack said, setting her down and looking at his too perceptive daughter. "You're definitely not stupid. And yes, maybe Miss Lena is. We're figuring it out." "Good," Ellie said decisively. "She makes you happy. And she makes really good snacks. Those are the two most important things." As they drove home, Ellie chattering about her day and her latest reading achievement, Jack felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not just the grim determination to survive another day, but actual hope for a future that could be joyful and full and shared with someone special. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be complications with Edward Brooks, questions about how to blend their vastly different worlds, challenges he couldn't even anticipate yet. But for the first time since Sarah died, Jack felt ready to face those challenges, because he wouldn't be facing them alone, and neither would Lena. The dinner at Lena's apartment the following evening started with minor chaos, when Ellie knocked over a water glass in her excitement, soaking the tablecloth and causing a flurry of paper towels and apologies. But Lena just laughed, her eyes meeting Jack's over his daughter's head with a warmth that made his chest ache in the best possible way. "It's just water," Lena said, mopping up the spill with practiced efficiency. "No harm done. Besides, I was thinking we needed to christen this table with a proper family dinner disaster." "Family dinner," Ellie repeated, testing the words. She looked at Jack with wide, questioning eyes, and he knew his daughter was asking permission to hope for something bigger than just tonight. "Yeah, sweetheart," Jack said softly. "Family dinner." They ate the lasagna Lena had made, which was actually delicious despite her protestations about her cooking skills, and talked about everything and nothing. Ellie dominated much of the conversation, sharing elaborate stories about school and her friends, and a science project involving volcanoes that had apparently gone spectacularly wrong. Lena listened with genuine interest, asking questions and offering suggestions, while Jack watched the two most important people in his life connect over garlic bread and laughter. After dinner, while Ellie was absorbed in a book in Lena's living room, Jack helped with dishes in the kitchen. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, the domesticity of the moment feeling both natural and slightly surreal. "Your father called me today," Jack said finally, rinsing a plate. Lena's hand stilled in the soapy water. "What? When?" This afternoon. I gave him my number last night before he left, just in case. He wanted to talk. About what? Jack, I'm sorry if he was threatening you or he wasn't threatening me, Jack interrupted gently. He was apologizing, actually, and asking questions about my intentions, my job, my daughter. It was like a job interview combined with a dad talk. Oh, God. Lena looked mortified. I'm going to kill him. Don't. It was fine. Awkward, but fine. Jack set down the plate and turned to face her. He loves you. That much is crystal clear, and he's trying, really trying to respect your boundaries while also being a father. I can understand that impulse. What did you tell him about your intentions? The truth. That I care about you. That I'm not after your money. That I'm willing to take things slow and figure this out together. That Ellie's well-being is my top priority, which means not rushing into anything without being sure. Lena nodded slowly, processing this. And what did he say? He said he appreciated my honesty. Then he offered me a job. He what? Lena's voice went up an octave. A job. At one of his companies. Better pay, better hours, better benefits. He said any man dating his daughter should have the resources to, and I quote, provide adequately. That manipulative... Lena's face flushed with anger. Jack, please tell me you told him where he could shove that job. I turned him down, Jack said calmly, politely but firmly. I told him I appreciated the offer, but I didn't want there to be any confusion about why I'm with you. I need to make my own way. Some of the tension left Lena's shoulders. Thank you. I know that couldn't have been easy. Better pay and hours would come with strings attached, Jack finished. I've been poor before. I can handle being poor. What I can't handle is your father thinking he can buy influence over our relationship. Our relationship? Lena smiled despite the stress of the conversation. I like how that sounds. Yeah? Jack moved closer, his hands finding her waist. Me too. They were interrupted by Ellie calling from the living room. Dad, Miss Lena, come look at this picture. They found her pointing at a framed photograph on Lena's bookshelf. A young woman on horseback, mid-jump, her face alight with joy and fierce concentration. Is that you? Ellie asked Lena. Yes, that was about 4 years ago, at a competition. You look so happy, Ellie observed with the blunt honesty of childhood. Do you miss it? The horses? Jack started to intervene. Ellie, that's not really... But Lena held up a hand, stopping him. It's okay. Yes, I miss it. A lot. Riding was my favorite thing in the world. The freedom of it, the partnership with the horse, the way everything else disappeared when I was in the saddle. She paused, touching the frame gently. After my accident, I thought I'd never have that feeling again. And mostly I haven't. But sometimes, when I'm teaching or spending time with people I care about, I get glimpses of that same joy. Different, but still real. Could you ride again? Ellie asked. In the chair? There are adaptive riding programs, Lena said. Special saddles, mounting assists, horses trained for it. But I haven't tried. I think I've been scared that it wouldn't be the same, that it would just remind me of what I lost. Or it might remind you of what you still have, Jack said softly. Lena looked at him, something shifting in her expression. Maybe. The weeks that followed brought changes that felt both monumental and quietly natural. Lena and Jack fell into a routine of shared dinners, weekend outings, and stolen moments of privacy when Ellie was occupied. They were careful, deliberate, taking things slow for Ellie's sake and their own. But the foundation was solid, built on genuine friendship and respect before it ever became romance. Edward Brooks proved true to his word about backing off, though he maintained regular contact with Lena. He came to dinner at her apartment once a week, and to Jack's surprise, those dinners gradually included him and Ellie. The billionaire was stiff at first, clearly unused to casual family meals in modest apartments, but Ellie's unfiltered commentary and questions slowly drew him out. Mr. Brooks, if you have so much money, why do you wear the same suit every time? Ellie asked one evening in February. Ellie! Jack was mortified, but Edward actually laughed. I have many suits, Ellie. They just all look the same because I don't like making decisions about clothes. I'd rather think about more important things. Like what? Like how to make technology that helps people. Like spending time with people I love. Like whether your father's garlic bread is better than the restaurant version. He took a bite thoughtfully. I'm going to say yes, for the record. Dad's garlic bread is legendary, Ellie agreed seriously. It's his superpower. These small moments accumulated into something larger, a tentative but growing family unit that surprised everyone involved. Edward was learning to be a father without being a controller, to offer support without strings attached. He fixed the elevator in Lena's building as promised, then quietly established a scholarship fund at Ellie's school without making a fuss about it. When Jack found out about the latter, he confronted Edward directly. I don't need charity, Jack said, his voice tight. It's not charity, Edward replied calmly. It's a scholarship fund available to all students who qualify based on merit and need. Ellie happens to qualify. So do 15 other children. If you turn it down, you're not making a point about pride. You're limiting your daughter's opportunities. Jack wanted to argue, wanted to maintain his independence, but Edward was right. This wasn't about him. It was about giving Ellie every advantage possible. Thank you, he said finally, the words difficult but necessary. Don't thank me. Thank your daughter for being bright and deserving, and thank yourself for raising her so well despite impossible circumstances. Edward paused. Jack, I'm not trying to buy your compliance or Lena's affection. I'm trying to be useful, to contribute. Is that really so terrible? No, Jack admitted. It's not terrible. It's just hard to accept sometimes. I understand. I was once a proud young man too, determined to prove I didn't need anyone's help. Edward smiled slightly. Then I learned that accepting help isn't weakness. It's wisdom. We're all connected. We all need each other. The sooner you accept that, the easier life becomes. Spring arrived with unexpected warmth, painting the city in shades of green and gold. Lena's reading sessions with Ellie had evolved into something more comprehensive. Help with all her homework, discussions about books and ideas, occasional field trips to museums or libraries. Ellie had caught up with her class and then surpassed them, her confidence blooming alongside her skills. She's going to need more challenging materials soon, Lena told Jack one Saturday in April as they walked through the farmer's market, a routine they'd maintained every week without fail. She's reading at a 6th grade level now. I'm running out of age-appropriate books that will still stretch her. That's a good problem to have, Jack said, reaching over to take her hand. The gesture still felt new enough to send a small thrill through him every time. You've been amazing with her, Lena. I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to thank me. Teaching her has been... Lena paused, searching for words. It's given me back a piece of myself I thought I'd lost. Purpose. Identity beyond just surviving. She reminds me why I love teaching in the first place. They were at the honey stand, their traditional stop, when Jack's phone rang, his supervisor at the warehouse calling on a Saturday, which was never good news. I need to take this, Jack said apologetically, stepping away. The conversation was brief and devastating. The warehouse was downsizing, cutting staff to reduce costs. Jack's position was being eliminated. They'd give him 2 weeks severance and a reference, but after that, he was on his own. When he returned to Lena, she took one look at his face and knew something was wrong. What happened? I just lost my job. The words felt surreal even as he said them. That job had been his stability for 3 years, the thing that kept them housed and fed and barely afloat. Without it? Oh, Jack. Lena's hand tightened on his. I'm so sorry. I need to start looking immediately. Need to figure out what comes next. The rent is due in 3 weeks, and after that, he was spiraling. He could feel it, but couldn't seem to stop. I should have seen this coming. Should have had a backup plan. Should have... Jack, Lena's voice cut through his panic. Breathe. We'll figure this out. We? Yes, we. You're not alone in this. But even as she said it, Jack felt the walls closing in. He'd been so careful not to become financially dependent on Lena, not to let her wealth become a solution to his problems. Now, faced with unemployment and potential eviction, that independence felt like foolish pride. Over the next week, Jack applied to every job he could find. Warehouse positions, retail work, security jobs, anything that might provide steady income. He went to interviews with his best shirt pressed and his resume polished, trying not to let desperation show through. But the market was tight, and competition was fierce, and every rejection felt like another door closing. Lena offered to help, multiple times, in multiple ways. She could talk to her father's companies, she had connections. She could provide a loan to bridge the gap. Jack refused every offer, his pride asserting itself even as his bank account dwindled towards zero. "This is ridiculous," Lena said finally, 2 weeks into his unemployment. They were at his apartment, and the tension had been building all evening. "You're struggling because you're too stubborn to accept help from someone who cares about you." "I'm struggling because I lost my job," Jack shot back, "not because I won't take handouts." "Handouts? Is that what you think this is? Isn't it? You're wealthy, I'm broke, you want to swoop in and fix everything with your money. How is that different from what your father tried to do to you?" The comparison hit home. Jack saw it in the way Lena flinched. Too far. He'd gone too far. "That's not fair," she said quietly. "I know, I'm sorry. Jack ran his hands through his hair, exhausted and scared and taking it out on the person who least deserved it. "I need to do this myself, Lena. I need to prove I can take care of my daughter without depending on your family's money." "Why? To prove what, exactly? That you're too proud to ask for help? That independence matters more than Ellie's stability?" "That's not what I'm saying." "Then what are you saying? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're willing to let your daughter suffer because you're too stubborn to accept support from your girlfriend." The word girlfriend hung in the air between them. They'd been dancing around labels, taking things slow, being careful. But now it was out there, loaded with implications about what they were to each other and what that meant. "This isn't about stubbornness," Jack said, his voice low. "It's about not wanting to be that guy. The one who dates a wealthy woman and suddenly all his problems are solved by her bank account. It's about maintaining my self-respect." "And what about my feelings?" Lena's voice rose. "Do those factor into your self-respect calculation? Because watching you struggle unnecessarily while I have resources that could help, that hurts, Jack. It makes me feel useless. Like you don't really trust me or this relationship." "That's not true." "Then prove it. Let me help. Not because you need a handout, but because that's what people who love each other do. They help each other through hard times." The word love stopped Jack cold. They hadn't said it yet, hadn't crossed that line, but there it was, spoken in anger, but no less true. "You love me?" he asked. Lena's expression softened, anger giving way to vulnerability. "Yes, you idiot. I love you. I love Ellie. I love the life we're building together. And I love you enough to be angry when you're sabotaging yourself out of misplaced pride." Jack sank onto the couch, all the fight draining out of him. "I don't know how to do this. How to accept help without feeling like I'm failing. Sarah and I, we did everything ourselves. We were partners, equal contributors. How am I supposed to be your equal when there's such a massive disparity between us?" Lena wheeled over to him, taking his hands in hers. "You think equality is about matching bank accounts? Jack, you contribute so much to this relationship. You've taught me about resilience, about showing up for people, about building a life with limited resources but unlimited love. You've welcomed me into your family, made me feel valued for who I am rather than what I have. That's not inequality, that's partnership. But practically speaking, I have money I didn't earn and don't need. It's just sitting there while you're struggling to feed your daughter. How is it pride to refuse help? How is it strength to suffer unnecessarily?" She squeezed his hands. "Let me help. Not as a wealthy person rescuing a poor person, but as someone who loves you wanting to support you through a difficult time." Jack looked at their joined hands, at this woman who'd somehow become essential to his existence, and felt his resistance crumbling. "I'm scared," he admitted. "Scared that if I start relying on you, I'll lose myself. That I'll become someone who needs to be taken care of instead of someone who takes care of others. That's not how this works. You don't become less by accepting help. You become more connected, more human, more part of something larger than yourself." Lena's voice was gentle now. "Besides, you take care of me too. You don't see it because it's not about money, but you do. You support me emotionally. You stand up for me. You make me laugh. You've helped me reconnect with my father. That's valuable, Jack. That's contribution. So what do? Jack asked. How do we navigate this without me feeling like dead weight? We figure it out together. Maybe I help with rent for a few months while you look for a job that's actually good for you, not just the first thing you can find. Maybe my father knows about positions that would suit your skills. Maybe we talk about what comes next, for both of us, and make decisions as a team instead of as individuals trying to maintain independence. It made sense. All of it made sense. But years of conditioning, of being the sole provider, of equating self-worth with financial stability, made it hard to accept. Can I think about it? Jack asked. Not long, just, I need to sit with this, process it. Of course. Lena kissed his forehead gently. Take the time you need. But Jack, don't take so long that you end up evicted. Pride doesn't keep you warm at night. After she left, Jack sat in the dark apartment, thinking about partnership and pride and what it meant to truly share your life with someone. He thought about Sarah, about how they'd struggled together, splitting every burden down the middle. But Lena wasn't Sarah, and this relationship wasn't a repeat of his marriage. It was something new, with its own rules and dynamics. Around midnight, he called Edward Brooks. Jack? Edward sounded alert despite the late hour. Is everything all right? Not really. I lost my job, I've been too proud to ask for help, and I think I almost pushed your daughter away because I'm an idiot. There was a pause, then a dry chuckle. Well, at least you recognize the problem. That's progress. I need advice from someone who's navigated the wealth disparity issue in a relationship. My office. Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. We'll talk. Edward's office was everything Jack expected. Top floor, panoramic windows, furniture that probably cost more than Jack's car. But Edward himself was surprisingly approachable, gesturing Jack toward a comfortable chair and pouring coffee from an expensive-looking machine. Lena's mother came from money, Edward began without preamble. I came from nothing. When we first got together, I was determined to prove I didn't need her family's wealth. I worked insane hours, refused help, nearly destroyed myself trying to build my company without any assistance. What changed? Jack asked. Caroline sat me down one day and asked me a question. Was I refusing her help because it was the right thing to do, or because I was more committed to my pride than to our relationship? Edward smiled sadly at the memory. I didn't have a good answer, so she proposed a deal. She'd invest in my company, not as a gift, but as an actual business investment with proper terms and expectations. That way I wasn't accepting charity. I was accepting a business opportunity from someone who believed in me. And that worked. It gave me the capital I needed to grow the company while letting me maintain my dignity. Was it still her money? Yes. But the framing mattered. It mattered to me, and more importantly, it mattered to us. Edward set down his coffee cup. Jack, I'm not going to pretend your situation with my daughter is simple. It's not. But here's what I've learned. Partnership isn't about equal financial contribution. It's about equal emotional investment, equal respect, equal commitment to building something together. Lena said something similar last night. She's smarter than both of us combined, so you should probably listen to her. Edward leaned back in his chair. I'm going to make you an offer, and I want you to actually consider it instead of rejecting it out of hand. Jack braced himself. I have a position opening in my company's logistics division. It's legitimate work. Managing supply chains, coordinating shipments, optimizing warehouse operations. It pays well, has good benefits, and would actually use your experience in a meaningful way. I'm not inventing this job for you. It's real, it's necessary, and you'd have to interview and prove yourself like anyone else. But yes, the fact that you're dating my daughter is why I'm telling you about it directly, instead of letting you find it through normal channels. Is that nepotism? Maybe, but it's also how the world works. People help the people they care about. If you're qualified, and based on your work history, you are, then why shouldn't I give you an opportunity? Jack wanted to refuse. Every instinct screamed at him to maintain independence, to keep his relationship with Lena separate from her father's influence. But he thought about Ellie, about the stress of job hunting, about Lena's words last night. What's the interview process? he asked finally. You'd meet with the department head, go through a skills assessment, and if you're hired, you'd start like any new employee. I won't interfere with the process beyond making the introduction. If they don't think you're right for the position, you won't get it. Fair? It was fairer than Jack had expected. Okay, I'll interview. Good. I'll set it up. Edward paused. Jack, I know this is hard for you, but you're going to have to get comfortable with the fact that being part of Lena's life means being part of a family that has resources. You don't have to take advantage of those resources, but you can't let pride prevent you from accepting reasonable help either. Is there a balance that doesn't make me feel like I'm selling out? Eventually, yes. It takes time to find it. Caroline and I spent years negotiating those boundaries. Sometimes I'd let her help. Sometimes I'd insist on doing things myself, and gradually we figured out what worked for us. He smiled. The key is communication. Talk to Lena. Tell her your fears. Listen to hers. Build something that respects both of your needs. The interview happened 3 days later, and to Jack's genuine surprise, it was rigorous and professional. The department head, a no-nonsense woman named Patricia Chen, grilled him on logistics, problem-solving, and technical skills. She didn't mention Lena or Edward treating Jack like any other candidate. By the end of the 2-hour interview, Jack was exhausted but energized. This was work he could actually do well, work that would use his brain instead of just his back. You'll hear from us within a week, Patricia said, shaking his hand. For what it's worth, I'm impressed. Your experience is unusual but relevant. You think like someone who's had to solve real problems with limited resources. That's valuable here. Jack got the job offer 5 days later. The salary was more than he'd made at the warehouse. Not extravagant, but comfortable. Enough to pay rent without anxiety, to buy Ellie proper school supplies, to take Lena to dinner without calculating every penny. When he told Lena, she cried. I'm so proud of you, she said, kissing him thoroughly. See? You didn't need a handout. You just needed an opportunity. An opportunity your father provided, Jack pointed out. An opportunity you earned. Don't diminish your achievement. She pulled back to look at him seriously. Are you okay with this? Really okay? I think so. It still feels complicated, but yeah, I'm okay. I'm going to work hard, prove I deserve the position, and try not to overthink the fact that I got it through family connections. Welcome to how 90% of good jobs are found, Lena said dryly. It's not what you know, it's who you know. You might as well benefit from that like everyone else. The new job started in May, and Jack was surprised by how much he enjoyed it. The work was challenging, his colleagues were competent, and Patricia Chen was a demanding but fair boss. He worked hard, put in extra hours when needed, and slowly earned respect based on his merits rather than his connections. Life stabilized in ways Jack had forgotten were possible. He had reliable income, regular hours, and actual healthcare benefits. Ellie thrived, her reading now so advanced that Lena had transitioned from tutor to mentor, recommending books and discussing themes like colleagues. The three of them fell into routines: Friday movie nights, Sunday brunches, Saturday farmers market trips that had become sacred. Edward became a regular presence too, awkward but trying. He'd show up for Ellie's school events, sitting in the back and applauding loudly. He'd invite them all to dinners at restaurants Jack would never have entered on his own, then make a point of asking Ellie about her opinions and treating her contributions seriously. He was learning, gradually, how to be a grandfather and father without being a controller. One Saturday in late August, Jack came home from a morning run to find Lena and Ellie huddled together on the couch, looking at something on Lena's tablet with unusual intensity. What's going on? He asked, grabbing water from the fridge. Miss Lena found an adaptive writing program, Ellie announced excitedly. And they're having an open day next month. She should go. Jack looked at Lena, who seemed both excited and terrified. I don't know, she said. It's been so long, and what if it's awful? What if it just makes me sad? Or, Jack said, sitting beside her, what if it's amazing? What if you get back something you thought you'd lost? Your dad's right, Ellie said seriously. You always tell me that trying hard things is how we grow. You should try this hard thing. Lena laughed, wiping her eyes. Using my own advice against me. That's clever. So you'll go? Ellie pressed. We'll go, Jack corrected. All of us. If you want support, you've got it. The open day at Horizon Therapeutic Riding Center arrived with perfect late summer weather, sunny but not too hot, with a breeze that carried the smell of hay and horses. Jack had never been around horses much, but Ellie was vibrating with excitement, asking Lena 1,000 questions about everything from saddles to horse psychology. The center was beautiful, with accessible pathways and facilities clearly designed for people with various disabilities. Lena grew quieter as they approached the barn, and Jack took her hand, squeezing gently. "You don't have to do this if you're not ready," he murmured. "I'm terrified," she admitted, "but I want to try." They were greeted by a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and capable hands, who introduced herself as Margaret, the program director. She took them through the facility, explaining the adaptive equipment, the specially trained horses, the safety protocols. Other people with disabilities were there too, some in wheelchairs like Lena, others with different challenges. And Jack watched his girlfriend's face transform as she saw people riding, laughing, connecting with the animals. "Would you like to try?" Margaret asked Lena. "We have a lovely horse named Sunshine, who's perfect for first-timers or people returning to riding." Lena looked at Jack, at Ellie, then back at Margaret. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I want to try." The process of getting Lena mounted was more complex than Jack had imagined, involving a special lift and careful positioning. But once she was in the adaptive saddle, with Margaret's team supporting her and the horse standing calm and patient, something magical happened. Lena's whole body changed. Her shoulders straightened, her face lit up, and when Sunshine started walking, slowly, carefully, with handlers on either side, she gasped with pure joy. "Oh," she breathed. "Oh, I forgot. I forgot how this feels." Jack and Ellie walked alongside as Lena rode, watching her reconnect with this piece of herself. She was crying and laughing simultaneously, her hands gentle on Sunshine's neck, her voice soft as she spoke to the horse. "Thank you," she kept saying. "Thank you, thank you." After the ride, when she was back in her wheelchair and they were walking to the car, Lena was glowing. "I need to come back," she said. "I need to do this regularly. It's not the same as before, but it's still good. It's still real." "Then we'll make it happen," Jack said. "Whatever you need." That evening, at Lena's apartment, after Ellie had fallen asleep on the couch mid-movie, Jack and Lena sat together in the kitchen, drinking wine and talking in low voices. "Today was important," Lena said. "Not just because of the riding, but because you supported me through something scary. Because Ellie pushed me to try. Because we did it together." "That's what families do," Jack said. "Is that what we are? A family?" Jack had been thinking about this question for months, dancing around it, hesitant to name something that felt so significant. But watching Lena ride today, seeing the joy on her face and Ellie's, feeling the rightness of their connection, it clarified everything. "Yeah," he said, "I think we are. Not traditional, kind of patchwork, but real." "I love you," Lena said. "I know I said it before in anger, but I'm saying it now on purpose. I love you, Jack Turner. I love Ellie. I love the life we're building." "I love you too," Jack said, and the words felt like coming home. "I've probably loved you since you emptied your purse on that counter to prove a point to Rick Meyer. But definitely since you started teaching my daughter that words are magic." They kissed, slow and sweet, tasting of wine and promise. When they pulled apart, Lena was smiling. "So what happens next?" she asked. "For us?" "I don't know," Jack admitted, "but I know I want to figure it out with you, whatever it looks like." "Even if it's complicated? Even with my father and the money and all the baggage we both carry?" "Especially then. Easy isn't always better. Sometimes the complicated things are the ones worth fighting for." Lena rested her head on his shoulder, and Jack wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. In the living room, Ellie snored softly, oblivious to the adult conversation happening nearby. Outside, the city hummed with its usual nighttime energy. And in this small apartment, 3 people who'd found each other through chance and choice were building something fragile and wonderful. A family stitched together not by blood or obligation, but by courage and love and the willingness to keep showing up for each other. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't always easy, but it was theirs. And that, Jack thought as he held Lena close, was everything that mattered. The months that followed brought a kind of happiness Jack had thought impossible after Sarah's death. Not a replacement for what he'd lost, but something entirely new, built on different foundations. By the time autumn arrived again, painting the city in familiar shades of amber and gold, their patchwork family had settled into rhythms that felt permanent, essential, like breathing. Lena had become a regular at Horizon Therapeutic Riding Center, going twice a week and gradually rebuilding skills she'd thought were gone forever. Jack would often bring Ellie to watch, and his daughter had developed her own fascination with horses, begging for lessons until Lena finally arranged for her to start learning alongside the adaptive riders. The three of them would spend Saturday mornings at the barn, surrounded by the smell of hay and leather, and the soft sounds of horses moving in their stalls. It was during one of these Saturday sessions in mid-September that Jack realized he wanted to marry Lena. Not someday, not eventually, but soon. The realization came quietly, without fanfare. He was watching her guide Ellie through proper grooming technique, both of them laughing at something the horse had done, and he thought, "This is it. This is what the rest of my life should look like." But proposing to Lena felt complicated in ways his proposal to Sarah hadn't been. There was Edward to consider, and Ellie's feelings, and the whole question of how to marry someone whose engagement ring would probably cost more than Jack made in a year. He spent weeks thinking about it, planning, trying to figure out the right way to ask. Edward, surprisingly, was his first conversation. "I want to marry your daughter," Jack said one evening in early October. They were having dinner at Edward's downtown penthouse. These dinners had become monthly occurrences, Edward's way of maintaining connection without being intrusive. "I'm asking your blessing, not your permission. She's a grown woman who makes her own choices, but you're important to her, and I want you to know my intentions are serious." Edward set down his wine glass, studying Jack with those sharp eyes that had intimidated so many business rivals. "You're asking my blessing while simultaneously telling me my opinion doesn't matter?" "No, sir. Your opinion matters. I just want to be clear that I'm marrying Lena regardless of what you say. But I'd prefer to do it with your support." A smile tugged at Edward's mouth. "You've grown bolder since we first met." "I've learned that being intimidated by you doesn't help anyone." Edward laughed, a real laugh, warm and genuine. "Caroline used to say the same thing, that I was only scary if you let me be." He paused, his expression softening. "Jack, I've watched you with my daughter for almost a year now. I've seen how you support her, challenge her, make her laugh. I've seen her happier than she's been since before the accident. So yes, you have my blessing. You've had it for months, honestly." "Thank you," Jack said, relief flooding through him. "But," Edward held up a hand, "if you hurt her, if you take her for granted, if you ever make her feel less than she is, you'll discover that I'm significantly more frightening than you currently believe." "Fair enough. Also, I assume you'll want a ring." Edward pulled out his phone, already scrolling through what appeared to be jewelry contacts. "I know some excellent—" "Already handled," Jack interrupted. "I've been saving for 3 months. It's not some massive diamond, but it's meaningful. It's right for us." Edward looked impressed. "You continue to surprise me, Jack Turner." The next conversation was with Ellie, and Jack was more nervous about this one. His daughter's opinion mattered more than anyone's. If she wasn't ready for this, if she didn't want Lena to officially join their family, Jack would wait. He'd wait as long as necessary. He broached the subject one evening after dinner when they were doing dishes together. Their traditional father-daughter talk time. "Ellie, I need to ask you something important." She looked up from the plate she was drying, her face suddenly serious. At 9 years old, she'd developed an uncanny ability to sense when conversations were significant. "Is something wrong?" "No, nothing's wrong. Actually, something might be very right, but I need to know how you feel about it first." Jack took a breath. "How would you feel if I asked Miss Lena to marry us? To officially become part of our family?" Ellie's face cycled through several emotions: surprise, consideration, and then pure joy. "Really? You want to marry her?" "I do. But only if you're okay with it. You and me, we're a team. We make big decisions together." "Dad." Ellie set down the dish towel and looked at him with exasperated affection. "I've been waiting for you to ask her for like 6 months. I even told Grandpa Edward you were being slow." "You what?" We talk sometimes. He picks me up from school occasionally, and we get ice cream. He asked if I'd be okay with you and Miss Lena getting married, and I said, obviously yes. And then he said you were probably overthinking it because that's what you do. She grinned. He's right. You overthink everything. Jack didn't know whether to be amused or horrified that his 9-year-old daughter and his girlfriend's billionaire father were conspiring behind his back. So you're okay with it? Really okay? Dad, Miss Lena is the best. She's smart and funny, and she doesn't treat me like a baby. She makes you happy, like actually happy, not just pretending to be fine happy. And she makes really good snacks. Ellie paused, then added more quietly, I think Mom would like her too. Jack felt his throat tighten. Yeah, sweetheart, I think she would. So when are you going to ask her? I'm working on a plan. Something special, something that matters. Can I help? Jack pulled his daughter into a hug, overwhelmed by her enthusiasm and her wisdom and the way she'd grown up so much while he wasn't paying attention. Actually, yeah, I could use your help. The plan came together over the next few weeks, with Ellie as an enthusiastic co-conspirator. Jack had learned from Margaret at the Writing Center about a boy who'd been in an accident at the facility years ago, a boy who'd been saved by a young volunteer. The details matched Lena's story perfectly. Margaret, moved by the romance of the situation, had helped Jack track down the boy, now 11 years old, and his family. His name was Michael Chen, and he'd grown up healthy and happy, with no memory of the incident that had changed Lena's life forever. His parents remembered everything, though: the woman who'd pushed their son to safety, the terrible sound of the horse's kick connecting, the guilt they'd carried for years. We sent flowers to the hospital, Mrs. Chen said when Jack called. We tried to visit, but her father had restricted visitors. We moved shortly after. My husband got a job transfer, and we lost touch. But I've never forgotten her, never stopped wondering how she was doing. She's doing well, Jack said. She's learned to ride again, actually, at Horizon. Really? Oh, that's wonderful. We'd love to see her if she'd be willing. Actually, Jack said, his heart pounding, I was hoping Michael could be part of something special. He explained his plan, and Mrs. Chen agreed immediately, tears in her voice. It would be an honor. Michael should know what she did for him. He should thank her. The pieces fell into place. Edward, when informed of the plan, offered to help with logistics. Margaret arranged for access to the riding arena on a Saturday afternoon when it would otherwise be closed. Ellie practiced her part a dozen times, determined to get everything perfect. The ring, a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds, sat in Jack's pocket like a hot coal, simultaneously burning and precious. He'd chosen sapphire because Lena had mentioned once that it was her mother's favorite stone, that she'd inherited her mother's blue eyes. The jeweler had looked skeptical when Jack explained his budget, but they'd worked together to create something beautiful within his means. It wasn't the massive diamond a billionaire's daughter might expect, but it was real and meaningful, and bought with money Jack had earned himself. That mattered. It had to matter. The Saturday arrived with perfect September weather, that golden quality of light that made everything look slightly magical. Jack told Lena they were going to the Writing Center for a special session, something Margaret had arranged. Lena agreed without suspicion. She trusted Margaret completely and had learned to embrace spontaneity. Ellie rode with them, bouncing in the back seat with barely contained excitement. Jack had warned her at least 5 times to play it cool, but his daughter had never been particularly good at hiding her feelings. You seem excited, Lena observed, glancing at Ellie in the rear-view mirror. I just really love horses now, Ellie said, which was true, but not the whole truth. She's been watching horse videos on YouTube all week, Jack added, which was also true. When they arrived at Horizon, Margaret met them at the entrance with a mysterious smile. We have something special planned today, Lena. If you'll follow me. She led them toward the outdoor arena, the same one where Lena had first ridden again, where she'd reconnected with this part of herself. As they approached, Jack felt his pulse quicken. This was it. No turning back. The arena looked beautiful. Someone had strung lights along the fence posts, and there were flowers arranged on the railings. Edward stood near the gate, dressed casually in jeans and a button-down, looking more relaxed than Jack had ever seen him. He winked at Ellie, who giggled and quickly covered her mouth. Dad? Lena looked confused. What's going on? Just wait, Edward said gently. Watch. From the barn emerged a small figure, a boy, maybe 11, walking carefully with a woman Jack recognized as Mrs. Chen. The boy was nervous, his hands fidgeting with the hem of his shirt, but his face was determined. Lena's breath caught. Is that? His name is Michael, Jack said quietly, moving to stand beside her wheelchair. Michael Chen. He doesn't remember what happened 8 years ago at this riding center, but his parents do. They've never forgotten the woman who saved their son's life. The boy approached, his mother's hand on his shoulder, and stopped a few feet from Lena. His eyes were wide, taking in the wheelchair, the woman in it, making connections his child's mind had never fully processed. Miss Brooks, he said, his voice soft. My mom says you're the reason I'm alive, that you saw the horse running and pushed me out of the way, that you got hurt because of me. Lena's hands were shaking, her eyes filling with tears. Michael, oh my God, you're so big. You were so small then, just a little boy. I don't remember much, Michael admitted, but I remember someone yelling and then being safe. Mom says that was you. She says you're a hero. I'm not, Lena's voice cracked. I just did what anyone would do. But you're the one who did it, Michael said. He stepped forward and, with the unselfconscious bravery of a child, wrapped his arms around her in a tight hug. Thank you. Thank you for saving me. Lena broke down then, holding this boy who'd cost her so much and given her nothing in return except the knowledge that he'd lived. Mrs. Chen was crying too, and even Edward had turned away to discreetly wipe his eyes. Jack knelt beside Lena's wheelchair, waiting for the moment to be right. When Michael finally stepped back and Lena looked at Jack with tears streaming down her face, he took her hand. Lena, he said, his voice steady despite his pounding heart. For 8 years, you've carried the weight of that accident. You've wondered if it was worth it, if the sacrifice meant anything. But look at him. He gestured to Michael, healthy and whole and standing there with his mother. He's your legacy. Your courage saved him. Jack, what? And your courage changed my life too. That day in Myers' store, you could have just left, could have accepted the humiliation and moved on. But you stood your ground. You showed me what real strength looks like. And then you did something even braver. You opened your heart to a broke single dad and his daughter, even though you had every reason to protect yourself from getting hurt again. He reached into his pocket, pulling out the small velvet box. Lena's eyes widened, her hand flying to her mouth. You taught me that strength isn't about standing tall. It's about showing up with love day after day, regardless of the obstacles. You've shown up for me, for Ellie, for yourself. You've rebuilt your life with grace and determination and more courage than I've seen in anyone. Jack opened the box, revealing the sapphire ring. Lena Brooks, will you choose us, me and Ellie, forever? Will you marry me? The arena was completely silent except for the soft sounds of horses in the barn and the wind in the trees. Lena stared at the ring, then at Jack, then at Ellie, who was bouncing up and down behind him. Say yes, Miss Lena, Ellie shouted, unable to contain herself any longer. Say yes! Lena laughed through her tears, reaching out to cup Jack's face with her free hand. Yes, yes, of course yes. You ridiculous, wonderful man. Yes. Jack slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, thank God. And then he was kissing her while Ellie cheered and Edward applauded, and the Chens watched with the satisfaction of people who'd witnessed something important. When they finally broke apart, Lena looked at the ring, then back at Jack. Did you plan all this? The location, Michael being here? I had help, Jack admitted. Ellie was my chief co-conspirator. Your father handled logistics, Margaret made the connections, but the idea was mine. I wanted you to see that your accident wasn't just tragedy, it was also heroism. That the choice you made to save Michael mattered. That you matter. I don't know what to say. Say you'll let me spend the rest of my life reminding you how extraordinary you are. Deal. She kissed him again, softer this time, a promise sealed. Ellie launched herself at both of them, wrapping her arms around them in an awkward three-way hug that somehow worked perfectly. We're going to be a real family now. Can I call you Mom? Lena pulled back, looking at Ellie with wonder. You want to call me Mom? I mean, if that's okay, I had one mom who I loved, and now I get to have another mom who I also love. Is that allowed? That's absolutely allowed, Lena said, pulling Ellie close. I would be honored to be your mom, Ellie Turner. Soon to be Ellie Turner Brooks, Ellie said confidently. We discussed it. I'm hyphenating. Jack looked at his daughter in surprise. We discussed this? When? With Grandpa Edward, over ice cream. We had a whole committee meeting about it. Edward cleared his throat. In my defense, she brought it up first. I merely provided informed counsel on the various options available for surnames post-marriage. You two have been conspiring for months, haven't you? Jack asked, but he was smiling. Someone had to move things along, Edward said with dignity. You were being unnecessarily cautious. Mrs. Chen approached then, Michael beside her, and she embraced Lena carefully. Thank you, she said simply, for then and for now, for letting us be part of this beautiful moment. Thank you for coming, Lena said, for bringing Michael, for letting me see what my choice meant. He's going to 6th grade now, Mrs. Chen said. He plays soccer, loves math, wants to be a veterinarian. He gets to have all of that because of you. Michael, shy but earnest, pulled something from his pocket, a small drawing on folded paper. I made this for you, he said, handing it to Lena. It's you and a horse, because Mom says you loved horses before and now you love them again. I'm not very good at drawing, but I tried. Lena unfolded the paper with trembling hands. The drawing was exactly what a talented 11-year-old might produce, recognizable but charmingly imperfect, showing a woman in a wheelchair next to a horse. At the top, in careful lettering, it said, "Thank you for being brave." It's perfect, Lena whispered. Absolutely perfect. Thank you, Michael. The afternoon dissolved into celebration after that. Margaret brought out sparkling cider and cookies she'd made special for the occasion. They toured the barn, with Michael asking 1,000 questions about horses and adaptive riding, and whether Lena had ever been scared to ride again. Edward and Jack found themselves in an awkward but genuine conversation about wedding planning and whether Lena would want something large or intimate. She'll want meaningful, Edward said. Caroline and I had a huge society wedding, and Lena always said it looked exhausting in the photos. I think she'll want something smaller, more personal. Good, Jack said, because I can't afford a huge society wedding, and I have no idea how to plan one anyway. We'll figure it out, Edward said. Together. That's what families do, apparently. The word families, coming from Edward Brooks, billionaire and former emotional fortress, was somehow the most surprising thing about the entire day. Jack looked at this man who'd been so difficult at first, so controlling and suspicious, and saw how much he'd changed, how hard he was trying to be better. Thank you, Jack said, for supporting this, for supporting us. Thank you for loving my daughter, Edward replied, for seeing her when others only saw the wheelchair or the money. That's all I ever wanted for her, to be seen. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the arena, Lena asked if she could ride one more time. Margaret quickly agreed, helping her onto sunshine with the ease of practiced routine. Jack and Ellie stood at the rail watching, with Edward beside them, as Lena guided the horse around the arena. She looked radiant, head high, shoulders back, completely at peace. The ring on her finger caught the light with each movement, and she kept glancing at it like she couldn't quite believe it was real. Dad? Ellie said quietly. Yeah, sweetheart. I'm really happy, like the happiest I've been since Mom died. Is that okay? Am I allowed to be this happy? Jack pulled his daughter close, kissing the top of her head. Mom would want you to be happy. That's what love does. It wants happiness for the people it touches, even after it's gone. You're not betraying Mom by loving Lena. You're honoring Mom by being brave enough to love again. Do you think Mom knows about Miss Lena and the wedding? I think if there's any way to know, she knows. And I think she's probably pretty pleased that we found someone so wonderful. Someone who makes really good snacks, Ellie added, because she was still 9 and snacks remained crucially important. Someone who makes really good snacks, Jack agreed. The wedding took place 3 months later in early December at the community center that had opened in place of Myers' corner store. The building had been anonymously funded, Edward's doing, though he never admitted it, and had become a hub for the neighborhood. It seemed fitting to Jack that they'd celebrate their union in a space that represented transformation, that had grown from something ugly into something beautiful. The ceremony was small, maybe 50 people, mostly neighbors and friends, and a few of Edward's colleagues who'd become genuine friends over the years. Lena wore a simple white dress that worked perfectly with her wheelchair, and she'd woven flowers into her hair. Ellie was the flower girl, taking her duties so seriously that she counted out each petal she dropped to ensure even distribution. Jack wore his best suit, purchased new for this occasion, a gift from Edward that he'd learned to accept gracefully. Sarah's guitar pick hung on a chain around his neck, a quiet acknowledgement of the love that came before, that made this new love possible. Patricia Chen from Jack's work was there, having become a surprising friend and mentor. Margaret from Horizon came with several staff members. The Chen family sat in the front row, Michael beaming with pride at being included. And scattered throughout were neighbors from Jack's building, Lena's former teaching colleagues, people whose lives had intersected with theirs in meaningful ways. Edward walked Lena down the aisle, or rather, walked beside her as she rolled herself forward with quiet dignity. He was crying openly, not even trying to hide it. And when the officiant asked who gave this woman in marriage, Edward's voice cracked when he said, "Her mother would have, if she could be here. I do so in her place with love and pride." The ceremony was brief but meaningful. They'd written their own vows, and Jack went first, his hands shaking slightly as he held Lena's. "Lena, when I met you, I was a man just trying to survive, working too much, sleeping too little, convinced that the best parts of my life were behind me. You showed me I was wrong. You taught me that strength comes in many forms, that courage is choosing to try again even after life has knocked you down, that love doesn't run out just because you've already loved and lost." He paused, gathering himself. "You taught my daughter that words are magic, but you taught me something more important, that showing up is magic, that choosing someone every day in small ways and large is how you build a life. I promise to keep showing up for you, to keep seeing you, to keep choosing you every single day for the rest of our lives." Lena was crying before he finished, and when it was her turn to speak, her voice was thick with emotion. "Jack, I spent years after my accident feeling invisible, or worse, hypervisible in all the wrong ways. People saw my wheelchair before they saw me. They saw my father's money and made assumptions. They saw limitations instead of possibilities. But you saw me. Just me. The woman who likes honey and misses horses and takes teaching too seriously. The woman who needed to prove she could be independent, even when independence was hard. You saw all of that and loved it, loved me, without trying to fix or change or improve anything." She squeezed his hands. "You and Ellie became my home when I didn't even know I was homeless. You gave me purpose and family and the courage to ride again, literally and metaphorically. I promise to see you just as clearly, to support your dreams, to be your partner in every sense of the word, for all our days." When the officiant pronounced them married, the small crowd erupted in applause. Jack kissed his wife, while Ellie cheered and Edward wiped his eyes and camera flashes popped from every direction. The reception was held in the same space, with folding tables covered in white cloths and food catered by local restaurants. Edward had wanted to hire some fancy catering company, but Lena had insisted on supporting neighborhood businesses. They compromised by Edward anonymously paying the local restaurants triple their normal rates, which satisfied everyone. There was dancing. Jack and Lena's first dance was to an acoustic version of At Last, with Jack kneeling so they were at eye level, his hands clasped with hers as they swayed to the music. Ellie danced with Edward, who moved with surprising grace for a man who claimed he never danced. The Chen family danced, and Margaret, and even Patricia from work, who'd brought her husband and 2 teenage kids. During a quiet moment when the party was in full swing and Jack had stepped outside for air, Edward joined him on the small patio behind the community center. "Quite a day," Edward said, lighting a cigar he'd been saving for the occasion. "Quite a day," Jack agreed. "You know, when I first met you, I thought you were all wrong for my daughter. Too poor, too simple, too ordinary." "I remember." "I was an idiot." Edward took a puff of his cigar. "You're not ordinary at all. You're exactly what she needed. Someone who sees her for who she is, who challenges her, who builds her up without diminishing himself. That's not common. That's not ordinary. That's extraordinary. I'm just a guy who fell in love with an amazing woman, Jack said. That's what Caroline used to say about me. Just a guy. She'd tell people when they asked how we met, completely ignoring that I was building an empire. She saw me. Not my ambition or my money, just me. He smiled at the memory. I miss her every day, but I'm grateful she taught me what real partnership looks like before she left. It's helped me understand what you and Lena have. Do you think she'd approve of Lena and me? Caroline? She'd adore you. She always loved people who stood up for what's right, who protected the vulnerable. She would have been at that corner store right beside you, telling Rick Meyer exactly what she thought of him. Edward laughed. Actually, she probably would have bought the store just to fire him. That's definitely a power move, Jack said. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching through the windows as Lena danced with Ellie, both of them laughing at something. Take care of them, Edward said quietly. My girls. Both of them. With everything I have, Jack promised. The party continued until late, with toasts and laughter and the particular warmth that comes from gathering people you love in one place. When it finally wound down, when the last guest had left and the cleanup was done, Jack and Lena and Ellie went back to Lena's apartment, their apartment now, as Jack and Ellie had officially moved in the week before. Ellie fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted from excitement and dancing. Jack carried her to her new room, a space they'd decorated together, with bookshelves and a reading nook and a window that got perfect morning light. She's out cold, Jack reported, returning to the living room where Lena waited. It was a big day for her too, Lena said. She got a new mom, participated in a wedding, and ate approximately her body weight in cake. The cake was really good. Your father-in-law spared no expense. She grinned at the term. That's going to take some getting used to. Jack sat beside her, pulling her close. Mrs. Turner Brooks. I like the hyphen, Lena said. It feels like both of us, together, but still individuals. Kind of like us, Jack observed. Exactly like us. They sat quietly for a while, processing the day, the enormity of the commitment they'd made. Outside, the December night was cold and clear, stars visible despite the city lights. Jack, Lena said eventually. Yeah? Thank you for waiting for me to be ready, for not pushing, for letting this develop at its own pace. I know it wasn't always easy. You were worth waiting for, are worth waiting for. Will always be worth it. Even with all the complications? The money, my father, the wheelchair, Especially with the complications, Jack interrupted. Those aren't bugs in our system, Lena. They're features. They're what makes us unique, what makes our story ours. She kissed him then, soft and lingering, and Jack thought about how far they'd both come. From that confrontation in a corner store to this moment, married and building a life together. How unlikely it all was. How perfect despite the unlikeliness. The months that followed brought new challenges and adjustments. Combining households meant negotiating space and schedules and the thousands of tiny compromises that make cohabitation work. Jack had to get used to living in a nicer apartment in a better neighborhood, had to adjust to the reality that his wife had resources he'd never imagined. Lena had to adjust to sharing her space with a 9-year-old who had strong opinions about everything and a husband who left coffee cups on every flat surface. But they figured it out, bit by bit, day by day. They established routines. Sunday breakfast at the diner down the street, Friday movie nights with homemade popcorn, Saturday mornings at Horizon where both Ellie and Lena now rode regularly. Edward came to dinner every other Wednesday, and Jack's relationship with his father-in-law evolved from wary respect to genuine friendship. In March, Lena made an announcement that surprised everyone. I'm going back to teaching, she said over dinner one evening, part-time at first. The community center is starting an after-school literacy program, and they've asked me to run it. That's wonderful, Jack said, genuinely excited for her. But I thought you said teaching wasn't accessible anymore, that schools weren't set up for... Traditional schools aren't, Lena interrupted. But this isn't a traditional school. This is a community program where I can set my own terms, adapt the space as needed, and work with kids who need extra support. Kids like Ellie was, falling behind and feeling stupid when they're actually brilliant. You're going to be amazing, Jack said. We're going to help, Ellie added. Right, Dad? We can volunteer. Absolutely, Jack agreed, already mentally rearranging his schedule to make it work. The literacy program launched in April and was an immediate success. Lena's combination of expertise, empathy, and high expectations drew kids who'd been struggling in traditional classrooms. She taught them that reading was a superpower, that words could transport you anywhere, that struggling didn't mean failing, it meant growing. Jack would sometimes stop by after work to pick up Lena and Ellie, and he'd watch through the window as his wife worked with students. She was transformed in those moments, confident, joyful, completely in her element. The wheelchair didn't matter to these kids. They just saw Ms. Brooks, the teacher who believed in them and made reading feel like an adventure. One evening in late summer, almost exactly 2 years after that first encounter in Myers Corner Store, Jack and Lena sat on their balcony watching the sunset. Ellie was inside, video chatting with friends from school, her laughter drifting through the open door. "Do you ever think about how different things would be if you just walked past that day?" Lena asked. "If you'd been like everyone else and pretended not to see?" "All the time," Jack admitted. "But I also think about how I couldn't have walked past. Not with Ellie watching, not with Sarah's voice in my head, not with my own conscience demanding action. So it was inevitable? Us? Maybe not inevitable, but possible. And possibility is sometimes enough. We just have to be brave enough to reach for it." Lena took his hand, her wedding ring catching the fading light. "I'm glad you reached. I'm glad you reached back." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights begin to twinkle as darkness fell. Inside, Ellie's laughter continued, the sound of a child who felt safe and loved and secure in her place in the world. It was in September, on their first wedding anniversary, that Lena shared news that shocked everyone. They were having dinner at Edward's penthouse, a celebration of their year of marriage, with champagne and elaborate food that Edward's chef had prepared. "I have an announcement," Lena said, her voice nervous but excited. "Actually, we have an announcement." Jack took her hand, providing silent support. They talked about how to share this news, whether to make it a big reveal or keep it quiet. In the end, they decided that family deserved to know. "I'm pregnant," Lena said simply. The silence that followed was profound. Edward's champagne glass stopped halfway to his mouth. Ellie's fork clattered to her plate. Even the chef, bringing in another course, froze in the doorway. "But," Edward started, then stopped. "The doctors said, after your injury, they said it was unlikely," Lena corrected. "Not impossible, just unlikely. Something about nerve damage and complications, and a 5% chance at best." She smiled, tears in her eyes. "Apparently we're in that 5%. Ellie found her voice first. "I'm going to be a big sister?" "You're already a big sister in every way that matters," Lena said. "But yes, there will be a baby, a little brother or sister who will be lucky to have you." Ellie launched herself at Lena, hugging her carefully but enthusiastically. Edward sat down heavily, looking like he might pass out, and Jack moved to pour him water. "Are you okay?" Jack asked quietly. My daughter who shouldn't have been able to..." Edward couldn't finish the sentence, too overcome with emotion. Caroline would have been so happy. She always wanted grandchildren. "She's going to have 2, Lena said, including Ellie in her gesture. 2 grandchildren who will know how much she would have loved them." The pregnancy was complicated in ways Jack hadn't anticipated. Lena's doctors were cautiously optimistic, but concerned about various risk factors related to her spinal injury. She had appointments constantly, monitoring and tests and consultations with specialists. Jack took time off work. His boss, Patricia, was understanding, giving him flexibility to attend appointments and support his wife. Edward wanted to hire private nurses, round-the-clock care, the best specialists money could buy. Lena refused, maintaining that she wanted a normal pregnancy experience as much as possible. They compromised on having a high-risk OB/GYN with expertise in spinal cord injuries, but otherwise keeping things relatively standard. The months passed with the typical mixture of excitement and anxiety that accompanies pregnancy. Ellie read every book about babies she could find, becoming an expert on fetal development and infant care. Edward called daily, checking on Lena with barely concealed worry. Jack watched his wife navigate the physical challenges of pregnancy combined with paralysis, and his respect for her courage grew even deeper. In March, on a Tuesday afternoon when the first flowers were beginning to bloom, Lena went into labor. The delivery was complicated. Multiple doctors, emergency procedures, moments when Jack held Ellie close and prayed harder than he'd prayed since Sarah's cancer diagnosis. Edward paced the waiting room like a caged animal, and even Patricia from work showed up to provide moral support. But at 7:43 p.m., after 12 hours of labor and more medical intervention than anyone wanted, a baby girl entered the world with a lusty cry that announced her determination to be heard. She was perfect, tiny and wrinkled and absolutely perfect. Lena held her daughter with trembling arms, tears streaming down her face, while Jack knelt beside the bed and Ellie peered over his shoulder at her new baby sister. "What's her name, Shai?" the nurse asked, ready to fill out paperwork. Lena looked at Jack and he nodded. They'd discussed this, had agreed on it weeks ago. "Caroline Sarah Turner Brooks," Lena said. "Caroline for her grandmother, who she'll never meet but who would have loved her. Sarah for Ellie's mother, who started all of this by teaching her husband to stand up for what's right." Jack couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but hold his wife's hand and stare at this impossible miracle. A baby who shouldn't exist, born to a mother who shouldn't have been able to carry her, welcomed into a family that had been built from courage and second chances and the willingness to keep trying even when everything seemed impossible. Edward came in shortly after, still in his expensive suit but with his tie askew and his eyes red from crying. He held his granddaughter with the careful tenderness of someone who'd forgotten how tiny babies were, how fragile and precious. "She looks like Caroline," he whispered. "My Caroline, same nose, same chin. Oh, Lena, your mother would have been so proud." "She looks like both Carolines," Ellie observed, studying her baby sister seriously. "And a little like Mom, my first mom, I mean. And Miss Lena. And maybe a little like Dad, too, though it's hard to tell because she's so squishy." Everyone laughed, the tension of the long delivery finally breaking into relief and joy. The weeks that followed were exhausting in the way that new parenthood always is, but with additional complications from Lena's wheelchair and limited mobility. Simple tasks like midnight feedings and diaper changes required adaptation and creativity. But they figured it out, the way they'd figured out everything else, together, with patience and humor and occasional frustration that always resolved into teamwork. Edward was surprisingly helpful, showing up with prepared meals and offering to hold the baby so Lena could rest. He'd learned from his mistakes with Lena, learned to help without controlling, to support without managing. He'd sit in their living room, tiny Caroline sleeping on his chest, and tell her stories about her grandmother, the woman she was named for, the woman who would have loved her so much. Ellie was a natural big sister, gentle and patient with the baby in ways that surprised Jack. She'd read to Caroline, sing to her, explain the world with the seriousness of someone who understood that big sisters were teachers and protectors and friends. One evening in late April, when Caroline was 6 weeks old and finally sleeping in longer stretches, Jack and Lena sat together on the couch while both girls slept. Ellie in her room, Caroline in her bassinet nearby. "We did it," Lena said, her head on Jack's shoulder. "We actually did it. Built a family, had a baby, survived the first 6 weeks without anyone dying of sleep deprivation." "You did it," Jack corrected. "You're the one who carried her, who went through that terrifying labor, who's feeding her every 3 hours." "We did it together," Lena insisted. "That's what all of this has been, from the very beginning, together." Jack kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and baby powder and the particular smell of home. "I love you. Have I mentioned that recently?" "Not in the last hour. I was starting to worry. I love you. I love our ridiculous, complicated, perfect life. I love that we have 2 daughters and a billionaire who brings us lasagna. I love that you taught yourself to change a diaper one-handed so I could hold Caroline while you work. I love that Ellie makes up songs about having a baby sister and sings them at inappropriate volumes. I love all of it. Even the 3 a.m. feedings. Especially the 3 a.m. feedings. There's something about sitting in the dark with our daughter, watching her eat, knowing that she exists because we were brave enough to try. Yeah, I love even that." They sat quietly for a while, exhaustion and contentment mixing into something peaceful. Outside, the city continued its usual rhythm, cars passing, people living their lives, the world turning whether they paid attention or not. But inside their apartment, time felt suspended, held in the gentle breathing of sleeping children and the warmth of shared love. "Jack?" Lena said sleepily. "Yeah?" "Thank you for not walking past that day. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for all of this. Thank you for letting me in, for trusting me with your heart, for building this life with me. We're pretty good at this, aren't we? The building a life thing? We're getting there, one day at a time." The years that followed brought the usual mixture of challenges and joys that fill any life. Caroline grew from infant to toddler to child, developing her own personality, fierce and funny, with her mother's determination and her father's kindness. Ellie flourished in school, eventually winning a writing competition that earned her a scholarship to a prestigious high school. Edward remained a constant presence, learning to be the grandfather he'd never quite managed to be as a father. Lena's literacy program expanded, eventually operating 5 days a week and serving over 100 students. Jack was promoted at work, his skills and dedication earning recognition that had nothing to do with family connections. They bought a house, larger than the apartment, accessible and comfortable, with a yard where the girls could play. The community center that had hosted their wedding became a second home, a place where they volunteered and taught and gave back to the neighborhood that had become their foundation. The corner store that had started everything, Myers, where Jack had first stood up for Lena, remained closed, its space absorbed into the community center's expansion. A small plaque by the door read, "Where you see wrong, don't look away." It was Jack's idea, and Lena had cried when she first saw it. On the 5th anniversary of their wedding, they returned to Horizon Therapeutic Writing Center for a special session. Ellie, now 14, was an accomplished writer. Caroline, 5 years old and fearless, was starting lessons. And Lena rode Sunshine, the same horse who'd welcomed her back to riding all those years ago. Jack stood at the rail watching his family, his wife and daughters, all in the arena, all laughing and learning and living. Edward stood beside him, older now but healthier somehow, more at peace. "You know," Edward said, "when I first met you, I thought my daughter was making a terrible mistake. Dating a poor warehouse worker, getting involved with someone so far removed from her world. I remember. I was completely wrong. You weren't removed from her world. You were exactly what her world needed. Someone who saw past the money and the wheelchair to the woman underneath. Someone brave enough to stand up for what's right, even when it was inconvenient. I just did what anyone should do. But most people don't. That's what makes it special. That's what makes you special." Edward paused. "Thank you, Jack, for loving my daughter, for giving me grandchildren, for teaching an old man that there's always room to grow and change. Thank you for learning, for letting go of control, for becoming the father Lena needed and the grandfather the girls adore." They watched as Lena guided Caroline through a basic writing pattern, patient and encouraging. Ellie rode nearby, occasionally offering advice, already showing signs of becoming a teacher like her mother. The late afternoon sun cast everything in golden light, making the whole scene look like something from a dream. "This," Jack said quietly, "is what I fought for that day in the store. Not consciously. I didn't know Lena would become my wife, that we'd have children, that standing up for her would change my entire life. But I knew that people like her, people who face the world with dignity and courage, despite how hard it is, deserve to be seen, deserve to be defended, deserve to be loved. And you saw her," Edward said. "When everyone else looked away, you saw her. That made all the difference." As they drove home that evening, all of them together in the adapted van they'd bought to accommodate Lena's wheelchair, Caroline chattered about her writing lesson while Ellie scrolled through her phone and Lena reached over to take Jack's hand. The ring on her finger, the sapphire he'd chosen so carefully, caught the light. "What are you thinking about?" Lena asked softly. "About how one moment can change everything. How standing up in a corner store led to all of this, the wedding, the kids, the life we've built. How random it all was. How easily it could have gone differently. But it didn't go differently. You chose not to look away, and I chose to trust you, and Ellie chose to love me, and we all chose to keep choosing each other." She squeezed his hand. That's not random, Jack. That's courage. That's love. That's us deciding over and over that this family is worth fighting for. Always worth fighting for, Jack agreed. That night, after the girls were in bed and the house was quiet, Jack and Lena sat together on their back porch, looking at the stars. They'd come so far from that November afternoon in Myers Corner store, from strangers to friends to lovers to spouses to parents. Every step had been uncertain, every choice carried risk, but they'd taken those steps together. If you could go back, Lena said, to that day in the store, knowing everything that would follow, the struggles with money, my father's interference, the complicated pregnancy, all of it, would you still intervene? Would you still stand up for me? Jack didn't even have to think about it. Every single time, in every possible universe, I would always choose to see you, Lena. Always choose to stand up. Always choose us. Good, she said, leaning into him, because I would always choose you back. Above them, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to human drama and human joy. But here on this porch, in this moment, Jack Turner held Lena Brooks. Turner Brooks and thought about courage, not the kind found in action movies or adventure stories, but the quiet, persistent courage of showing up for the people you love, day after day after day. The courage of not looking away. The courage of trying again after loss. The courage of building something new from broken pieces. That was their story. That was their triumph. Not perfect, not easy, but real and hard-won and absolutely worth every difficult step. From one act of courage in a grocery store had come a family that would stand together, wheels, scars, laughter, love, and all the beautiful, complicated truth of choosing each other, again and again, for all their days. And that, Jack thought as he held his wife close under the stars, was more than enough. It was everything.